Chapter 885. The 5 black-robed men from the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer sect landed on the ground at the same time and knelt down on one knee. They bowed to June Moxie. "Young master, the 5 of us did not disappoint you. You've worked hard. You've all gained quite a lot from this battle. Go back to the formation and meditate." June Moxie smiled and consoled them. Yes. The 5 of them stood up at the same time and returned to the formation. Everyone's faces were calm. June Mocie's side of the formation did not let out any cheers. It was as if the result of these 5 people's battle was just the most ordinary and trivial matter. It was not worth cheering for at all. Third round, 7 second-level saints. Hai Wu Ye's voice was filled with an uncontrollable killing intent. No matter what, they had to win the third round. Following his words, 7 white-robed figures walked out in an orderly manner. June Mocie looked over and saw that these 7 people looked almost the same. He couldn't help but be startled. Could it be that these 7 people are brothers? June Moxie's guess was right. These 7 second-level saints were all from the Supreme Golden City. Furthermore, they were 7 brothers born from the same mother. The 7-demon battle formation had the legendary name of massacring the world and causing rivers of blood to flow. Once the 7 of them joined forces, even a 4th-level saint wouldn't dare to take them lightly. Even if they were to face the Holy Emperor, these 7 brothers would still be able to put up a fight. Even if they could not win, their lives would not be in danger. The 7 brothers' hearts were connected and they had a natural rapport. Furthermore, with the 7-demon battle formation, they were like tigers that had grown wings. For this battle, the Holy Land side was determined to win. June Moxie furrowed his brows. Whether it was from their every movement, expression, or any other aspect, the 7 of them were like one body and could not be separated. This battle was probably going to be a truly fierce battle. An unprecedentedly fierce battle. It was hard to say who would win this battle. They are 7 brothers and their minds are connected. This is their greatest strength, but it is also their greatest weakness. Mei Shuyan said softly as she looked at the 7 people in front of her. "Oh." June Moxie looked at Mei Shuyan and waited for her to continue. Mei Shuyan smiled and said, "The reason is actually very simple. The 7 brothers have been together for hundreds of years. Naturally, their relationship is so deep that it is inseparable. Whether it was tacit understanding or cooperation between them, they didn't need to speak. They only needed to raise their heads or raise their eyebrows, and the other 6 would know what they meant." This kind of battle formation was undoubtedly the most terrifying battle formation, but it also had a fatal flaw, and that was that the feelings between the 2 sides were too deep, to the point where they could not live without each other. Mei Shuyan's eyes shone with wisdom. She said slowly, "If one person is injured, all 7 of us will be injured." 1 person was injured, 6 people were heartbroken. At that time, without waiting for her to finish, June Moxie suddenly clapped his hands, and his eyes shone brightly. He said in a low voice happily, "I understand. Haha. Shuiyan, you are really my good wife." Mei Shuyan's face turned red, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of sweetness in her heart. As long as she could help June Moxie with one thing, she would feel satisfied. Sometimes she also felt that it was strange. This was not in line with her original personality. Her feelings were involuntary, and she would even do it willingly. Mei Shuyan thought silently in her heart, perhaps this is the fate of women. June Moxie suddenly turned around and said, "Spirit Devourer Team 5, everyone, step out and get into formation." He thought for a while and said decisively, 7 stars Big Dipper formation. Looking at the 7 black-robed men in front of him, June Moxie stepped forward and gave some instructions in a low voice. The eyes of the 7 people flashed, and they looked at each other. After a short discussion, they finally strode out. On the other side, the 7 demons battle formation looked at the side discussing, but did not move at all. Their calm faces revealed a trace of disdain. Ever since the seven demons battle formation was set up, they had long forgotten how many opponents of the same level and even higher level they had killed. Even if the number of opponents of the same level far exceeded the 7 of them, they would still be able to annihilate all of them without suffering any losses. Right now, June Moxie's side had only sent out 7 second-level saints, and their strength was even weaker than the 7 brothers. In their eyes, they were just 7 prisoners who were already tied up and waiting to be beheaded. There was no challenge at all. Seeing the two sides approaching with killing intent, the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters turned his head and looked at the ashen-faced Chu Wu Hui. "Why don't we make another bet? This time, whoever loses the bet will have to eat those 1,000 earthworms. How about it? Do you dare?" If the previous bet about digging earthworms was considered a prank, the loser would at most make a fool of himself and lose some face. But now, the loser would have to eat those earthworms raw. That was a different story altogether. Xiao Ying was taken aback, and then she retched, "Eat earthworms raw? Could those things be eaten? And they had to be eaten raw? Heavens, just thinking about it was enough to make one die of disgust." As she thought about it, the heroic posture of the earthworms wriggling appeared in her mind. Although Xiao Ying's cultivation was shocking, she was still a girl after all. It was already a miracle that she did not vomit on the spot. Chu Wu Hui rolled his eyes and suddenly began to think carefully. Should he take this chance to turn the tables? Perhaps this was a good chance. The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters might not know the power of the 7 demon formation. The reason he dared to make such a huge bet was because he felt that the brat June Moxie had won 2 consecutive victories with the aid of a strange formation. His chances of winning were naturally high. But he did not know that the 7 demon brothers also practiced a formation that was extremely powerful. When the 7 of them worked together, their combined strength was comparable to that of a level 1 holy emperor. There was no way they would lose this battle. Thinking about the pathetic appearance of the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters swallowing the earthworms raw, Chu Wu Hui's lips unconsciously curled into a satisfied smile. As he thought about it, Chu Wu Hui purposely put on a hesitant expression, as if he was trying to reject the idea. "Brother 14th, isn't this a little unreasonable? Right now, everyone knows that the brat June Moxie has been practicing strange formations. Previously, there were 3-man formations, then 5-man formations. Now, there's a 7-man formation. Could it be that Brother 14th wants this old man to dig out the earthworms and eat them? Brother 14th, this method of yours is a little inappropriate, right?" The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters snorted and said calmly, "What's inappropriate about it? Since you don't have confidence in your own people, then this time, I'll bet on the 3 Holy Lands to win. You can bet on June Moxie's side." Chu Wu Hui instantly jumped up as if his buttocks were on fire. "Brother 14th, aren't you making things difficult for me? As the guardian of the Heaven Saint Palace, how can I not bet on my own people and bet on the enemy instead? Furthermore, we've already chosen our respective sides. This old man has always been betting on the Holy Lands, while you can only bet on the evil monarch's side. How can you change your mind halfway? This old man will go all out and bet with Brother 14th again. Isn't it just 1,000 earthworms?" The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters nodded and tilted his head. "Oh? Didn't you say that June Moxie's side has some sort of formation and has a higher chance of winning? This young master has already fulfilled your wish. Why are you changing your words now? You're really hard to please. And, from your words, this old man can only bet on the evil monarch's side to win? Wait, you clearly know that the other side might have a formation, but you still insist on betting like this. In other words, you're certain that the black side might not win. There are no absolutes in this world. There's no such thing as a sure win. From the way this old man sees it, both sides are evenly matched. Although the black side has a higher chance of winning, we might not necessarily lose. Even if we lose, I'll bet on our side." Chu Wu Hui hurriedly tried to cover up. Right now, he was afraid that the 9 serenities and 14 masters would do something like hegemony and bet with him regardless of whether he was willing or not. That would be terrible. I still don't think it's a good idea. You also said that the black side has a higher chance of winning. I'll let you take advantage of me this time. I'll still bet on the Holy Lands. The 9 serenities and 14 masters said sinisterly. Chu Wu Hui, it's settled then. You have to bet whether you want to or not. Chu Wu Hui was enraged as he retorted anxiously. Bullsh *t. Who starts a bet like this? There's only rape, there's no forced betting. This old man will never agree. This old man is a man of the Holy Lands in life, and a ghost of the Holy Lands in death. I'll only bet on the Holy Lands and nothing else. Old brat, you mean you're still betting on the 3 Holy Lands? The 9 serenities and 14 masters narrowed his eyes. That's right. That's what this old man means. Chu Wu Hui said unyieldingly. Fine. A bet is a bet. A bet is not a loss. I'll let you take advantage of me this time. The 9 serenities and 14 masters said straightforwardly. If the Holy Lands win this battle, I'll eat those 1,000 earthworms raw. But if the evil monarch wins, it'll be your turn. That's a promise. Chu Wu Hui was overjoyed. He suddenly felt that digging earthworms was not necessarily a bad job. Seeing the number 1 lunatic in the world eat earthworms raw, and those earthworms were all provided by him. Wahahaha! Whenever he thought of the bitter expression on the face of the 9 serenities and 14 masters as he ate the earthworms raw, Chu Wu Hui felt as if he'd eaten a divine pill. This matter would definitely become the most memorable thing in his life. It seemed like the final outcome had truly become the most memorable thing in Chu Wu Hui's life. Of course, as for how he would reminisce about it, that was a story for another time. The 9 serenities and 14 masters laughed coldly and scolded the idiot in his heart. Then, he waved his hands and said, That brat surnamed June, come over here. Don't worry, you still have to wait for a long time for your battle. Let's have a chat first. June Moxie was taken aback. He exchanged a look with Mei Shuyan and smiled lightly. Since Senior has invited me, I wouldn't dare to refuse. Then, he walked over calmly. Chapter 886. The Second Watch. The second watch today. June Moxie smiled lightly. If the other people of the 3 Holy Lands were here, this junior would naturally have to be careful of sneak attacks. But the ones here are Senior Qing, Senior Chu, and Senior Qiao. If the 3 guardians of Heaven Saint Palace don't even care about their face, then even if this junior really pays with his life, it's not a big deal. Good lad. Haha. Qing Yin Xiao was overjoyed. Although June Moxie's words were derogatory, it actually showed his trust in the 3 guardians. This kind of trust between enemies was the hardest to come by. Thus, Qing Yin Xiao couldn't help but smile. 9 serenities and 14 masters looked at June Moxie and said darkly, Surnamed June Brat, this young master has placed a heavy bet on you this time. Don't implicate this young master and make me lose the bet. Brat, how confident are you in this battle? June Moxie was stunned. The 3 Holy Lands have many talents, and their strength is unfathomable. I won the first 2 rounds by luck, but the 3rd round hasn't even started yet. How would I know how confident I am? We're risking our lives over there, but you guys are gambling with our lives here? This is a little unreasonable. Why can't we gamble? It's just a few lives, why can't we gamble with them? 9 serenities and 14 masters snorted. Since we're here to fight, we should be prepared to be killed at any time. It's just a few people dying, what's the point? Besides, we're gambling on victory and defeat, not on how many people will die. These few lives, in this young master's eyes, are really not qualified to be gambled. June Moxie had a bitter smile on his face, but there was some suspicion in his heart. Ever since 9 serenities and 14 masters appeared, His every word and action seemed to be helping him, and even seemed to be supporting him. Why was this so? Could it be that he recognized me? June Moxie, the battle formations that your subordinates are using are truly wondrous. Chu Wu Hui scoffed. These people's joint attacks were all taught by you? June Moxie revealed an ashamed smile and said, Senior, you think too highly of me. How could this junior have such a great ability? Oh, what kind of expert would be able to design such a powerful formation? Qing Yin Xiao followed up with another question. Of course it's someone else. June Moxie looked around and said, May I know what the stakes are? No matter what the bet is, you will definitely lose this battle. Chu Wu Hui was clearly dissatisfied with June Moxie changing the topic. Rolling his eyes, he turned his head away. June Moxie said blandly, Right now, victory and defeat have not been decided. How can it be that my side will definitely lose? Since Senior is so certain, then this junior will really wait and see. However, it seems that this junior has already won 2 matches. If I were to win this match, it would be equivalent to me obtaining half of the exquisite lotus. Don't worry, since the 3 of us have already acknowledged it, if we really lose to you, we will not go back on our words. Qing Yin Xiao said blandly. We've all lived for over 1,000 years, we still have this bit of credibility. You don't need to worry. I'm naturally not worried. June Mo Xie revealed a mocking smile. It's a pity that the number of people with such credibility in the 3 Holy Lands can be counted with one's fingers. There are very few of them. Brat, you've said it yourself. Right now, victory and defeat have not been decided, so what's the point of talking about the stakes? Do you think that the sharpness of your tongue can help you turn the situation around? Chu Wu Hui snorted coldly. To tell you the truth, brat, those 7 subordinates of yours already have half a foot in the netherworld. To think that you still have the time to boast shamelessly here. Hurry up and prepare your coffins. Life and death are decreed by fate, riches and honor are determined by the heavens. Just now, Senior 14th Young Master said it very well. Since we've come out to fight with our lives on the line, we should be prepared to be killed at any time. On this point, I and my subordinates are able to accept it. But what about the Holy Lands? June Moxie and Lengling laughed. Their words no longer had the slightest intention of backing down. Just as everyone was speaking, on the battlefield, the 14 people had already clashed. The 7-fiend battle formation revealed an overwhelming advantage from the very beginning. The combined might of the 7 of them was practically suppressing the 7 members of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer team. The moment they clashed, the situation had already become extremely bad. Even the spectators could barely breathe as they watched the battle. With just a single glance, Chu Wu Hui was already grinning from ear to ear. The situation before them was really too good. Victory was definitely within their grasp. If they still couldn't obtain victory with such an advantage, then it would really be strange. 9 serenities and 14 masters. 9 serenities and 14 masters. This old man admits that my strength is not as good as yours and I can't beat you in a fight. But if I can force you to eat raw earthworms, and 1,000 of them at that, this old man will wake up laughing even in my dreams. The 9 Nether 14th Young Master looked at the dusty battlefield, and a rare serious expression appeared on his face. Chu Wu Hui was even more elated when he saw this. Grinning widely, he said, Brother 14th, there's no need to be anxious. Didn't you always say that if there's a bet, there's no loss? The battle has only just begun. Who knows, the black-robed men might still have a chance to turn things around. It was obvious that he was taking pleasure in others' misfortune, that's right. As long as it's not the final moment, victory or defeat is still unknown. 9 serenities and 14 masters looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile and lectured, If you could put all your scheming skills into cultivation instead of fighting with words, perhaps your achievements would have already surpassed this young master. Chu Wu Hui paused for a moment and spat angrily as he turned to look at the battle. Without a doubt, this battle had attracted everyone's attention. The degree of attention was even greater than the previous two battles. 9 serenities and 14 masters furrowed his brows slightly. After watching for a while, he seemed to have understood something, and the sinister atmosphere around him also seemed to relax a little. Qing Yin Xiao had been paying attention to 9 serenities and 14 masters' expressions and actions. But he knew that among everyone present, the one with the best eyesight was definitely the 9 nether 14th young master. No one would doubt this. At this moment, he sensitively sensed that 9 serenities and 14 masters' expression and actions seemed to suddenly show signs of relaxing. His heart couldn't help but tighten as he asked, 14th brother's discerning eyes are brilliant. From 14th brother's point of view, who do you think will be the winner of this battle? 9 serenities and 14 masters sighed and shook his head. The outcome of this battle will be very strange. Strange? The others all looked at him. They felt a little strange in their hearts. The Holy Land's victory was already decided, so why did he say it was strange? What room was there for strange? In this battle, the 7-demon battle formation has the absolute advantage. It has already compressed the 7 black-robed men into a ball, making it difficult for them to even move and dodge. Just from this point of analysis, the Holy Land seems to have already won. 9 serenities and 14 masters smiled. But in this young master's opinion, the final outcome is still not certain. Why do you say so? From the start of this battle until now, there are 3 points of doubt that cannot be solved. Even this young master has not figured them out, and it is still the same even now. 9 serenities and 14 masters looked at Jun Moxie thoughtfully and did not continue speaking. 3 points of doubt? Qing Yin Xiao and the other two's expressions tightened as they focused on the battlefield again. White light blazed in the battlefield, and sword chi soared into the sky. On one side of the 7-demon battle formation, the 7 swords interweaved into a dense net, enveloping all the opponents within. The circle of the 7 black-robed men on Jun Moxie's side had already been compressed into a small ball, as if they were in danger of being destroyed at any moment. It was like a small boat struggling in the surging waves. Although it was surrounded by danger, it was still able to prevent itself from being swallowed by the huge wave. Chu Wu Hui watched for a while before suddenly slapping his forehead. F***ck, it's actually another strange formation. Earlier, it was a 3-man formation, then a 5-man formation, and now it's a 7-man formation. How could it be like this? Hearing his words, Qing Yin Xiao and Xiao Ying also saw through the mysteries of the formation. Regardless of whether the 7 black-robed men on Jun Moxie's side dodged or parried, the 7 of them maintained a strange formation from start to finish. The 7 of them leaped and weaved back and forth, but no matter how many changes they made, they were always at the same 7 fixed points. This kind of strange formation was truly unprecedented. The formation seemed to be very scattered, but if one thought about it carefully, it was actually connected from head to tail, as if they were a single entity. Although they did not seem to have the ability to attack, their defense was impenetrable and flawless. As they watched, everyone's expressions became heavy. These people's eyesight was all top-notch in the world. How could they not know that a perfect defense was equivalent to an invincible position? The first point of doubt is that from the start of the battle until now, both sides have been wielding their treasured weapons and have already declared that this is a battle of life and death. Especially in such a small area right now, not a single one of them has been injured. This is extremely strange. The 9 nether 14th young master raised a finger as he looked at the intense battle in the arena. He said slowly, "In such an intense battle, neither side has been injured in the slightest. This kind of result, even if it was you or me, we might not be able to achieve it." Qing Yin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui nodded slowly, furrowing their brows as they pondered. The second point of doubt is also the strangest point. From the start of the battle until now, there has not been a single sound of weapons clashing. In other words, each of them has attacked at least several hundred times, and the weapons in their hands have been swung at least several thousand times, but not a single one of them has come into contact with their opponent's weapon. 9 serenities and 14 masters laughed coldly. Isn't this the strangest thing in the world? If things are abnormal, then it's a demon. Isn't the current situation demon enough? Hearing 9 serenities and 14 masters' words, the 3 guardians also felt that something was wrong. In an instant, their faces changed greatly. This was not a good omen, for this extraordinary silence was like the calm before the storm. Once it started, it would be a violent storm, lightning flashing and thunder roaring. And this battle would most likely be like this as well. As long as there was the sound of weapons clashing, there might not be any injuries, because there would only be deaths. Both sides seemed to be preparing for their strongest attack. Once this stalemate was broken, it would be a bloody storm. As for the third point of doubt, it seems to be safe, but it's actually dangerous. It seems to be dangerous, but it's actually safe. This battle is really interesting. 9 serenities and 14 masters looked at June Moxie and laughed strangely. Tomorrow I'm going to take the driving test. I have to pass the driving test before I can enter the driving school. Poor me, I haven't even read a single page of the book yet. So I'm burning the midnight oil tonight to revise. If I fail, I'll have to wait until next month to take the test. Brothers, please give me a few monthly tickets to boost my morale. Bless the handsome, chic, pure, and flawless me to pass the examination smoothly. Amen. Since I'm going to fight this month, I won't give up halfway. Let me tell everyone a piece of good news. I've recovered from my cold today. Other than a little cough, I'm basically fine. Cough cough. Use the monthly tickets to celebrate for me. Chapter 887. Chapter 1. Active, passive, the position of the host and the guest switched. See, Chu Wu Hui sucked in a breath of cold air and stared unblinkingly at the battlefield. He said in disbelief, "How could this be? How was this possible? Did I really see a ghost?" The 7-demon battle formation, which was in a stalemate, was like a surging sea wave, rising and falling with the tide, each wave higher than the last. The 7 black-robed men, who had been forming a strange shape in a narrow area, were like the reefs on the shore, unmoving from beginning to end. Or perhaps it should be said that it was more like an unusually vast mountain range surrounded by the boundless ocean, but there was always a hard sharp edge exposed outside, and it had never been completely submerged. However, if one looked closely, they would be able to see that although the 7-demon battle formation had indeed taken up more than 90% of the offensive and seemed to have suppressed their opponents to the point where they could not breathe and could completely drown the 7-man formation at any time, their opponents were still as stable as Mount Tai. There was no danger at all. Moreover, with the continuous attacks of the 7-demon battle formation, the attacks of the 7 people of the 7-star battle formation were often aimed at the vital points of the enemy, causing the 7-demon battle formation to only be able to use half of its attacks before it had no choice but to retreat to defend itself. However, the other party did not take advantage of the opening to attack. Instead, they were only defending, as if they wanted to drag the fight on forever. In this way, both sides were attacking each other's vital points, but they were defending at the same time. This led to the strange situation where the 7 swords and the 7 broadswords had never touched each other since the start of the battle. But if one were to observe carefully along the way, one would be shocked to find that the one who had the initiative was not the 7-demon formation that was attacking like raging waves, but the 7 men in black who were occupying strange positions and forming a strange formation. Or perhaps it should be said that at the beginning, the fierce attacks of the 7-demon battle formation had indeed taken the initiative, but when the opponent's 7 stars Big Dipper battle formation slowly unfolded, the situation had already become even. Then, as the battle situation changed step by step, the initiative had unknowingly fallen into the hands of the opponent. However, the other side did not launch an attack and only defended, giving everyone the wrong impression. Therefore, in terms of results, the process of these three battles was still exactly the same. They were all defeated but not defeated, and turned defeat into victory. It was exactly the same, and there was nothing new. 9 Serenities and 14 Masters looked at June Moxie and said with a smile, "Kid surnamed June, where did you get these strange formations? This young master is guessing that it was your mysterious master who taught you, right?" As soon as these words came out, the three guardians who had just fallen into a huge shock were once again greatly shocked. 14th brother, do you know who his master is? Or could it be that you are acquainted with his master? Ching Yin Zhao's eyes flashed as he asked indifferently. June Moxie's master had always been a huge mystery. No matter how much of a genius a person was, it was impossible for him to reach such a level without a master. June Moxie's master is bound to be an earth-shattering figure. It's just that everyone knows this. But no one can figure it out even if they break their heads. He can refine those miraculous pills. And he can even train such a miraculous disciple. And he can even be the true owner of those miraculous formations. So, what kind of great expert is he? In this period of time, the Heaven Saint Palace had practically analyzed all the information of the experts from the past 3,000 years, but all of them were rejected. This person's foundation was boundless, and he was simply too powerful, to the point that there was no one who could match him. Hearing the tone of the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, it seemed like he actually knew this person. How could the three not be curious? The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters didn't know whether to agree or disagree. Smiling lightly, he said, "This kid's master made me owe him a huge favor, but I just can't find a chance to return it. Depressing to be able to make this young master feel so dejected. Just what kind of person do you think he is?" The three sucked in a breath of cold air. To be able to make the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters owe him a favor, to the extent that he couldn't return it, just what kind of person could it be? Seeing that the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters didn't seem to want to say more, the three of them were extremely curious. 14th brother, this evil monarch's master, how many % of 14th brother's strength is he, and how does he compare to us? Chu Wu Hui asked carefully. This question caused the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters to hesitate, because the last time they met, even he didn't know the background of this 9 Firmament First Old Master, or what level of strength he had reached. But there was one thing he was sure of, and that was that the other party was definitely not below him. He thought for a long time before saying, "He's definitely stronger than the few of you. As for comparing him to me, that's really hard to say. That person's strength is unfathomable, and unfathomable. I really don't have the confidence to defeat him, even if it's a life and death battle. I also don't have the confidence to kill him." The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters was speaking the truth. The three of them could tell that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. But it was also because of this that the three protectors' faces changed. An existence that even the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters didn't have the confidence to defeat. Didn't that mean that this person's strength might be even stronger than the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters? In addition to his pill-refining skills, and the mysterious formation that they saw today, what kind of expert was this? This. There's actually such a person in this world? How come we've never heard of him after living for more than 1,000 years? No wonder June Moxie's cultivation speed was so fast. It turned out that he really had such a heaven-defying master. However, the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters refused to reveal the specific name of the mysterious person, which added to the mystery of June Moxie's master. At this moment June Dashao asked, "Senior, do you know my master? You've met him?" The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters snorted coldly and said, "Not only have I met him, but that bastard of a master of yours also left me a huge debt that I haven't settled with him yet. Playing tricks, pretending to be mysterious, pretending to be a big deal. I despise him. I despise him even more. I'm ashamed to be associated with him. To tell you the truth, I'm very unlucky to have met that unlucky master of yours. So King unlucky tui. The 9 serenities and 14 masters' resentment soared to the heavens, and there was even a hint of resentment in his tone. It was like Yang Bailao was being pressured to pay off a debt, but as soon as he said this, Jun Moxie immediately knew that this guy seemed to have misunderstood. He recognized the 9 firmament first master as his master, but he didn't really see through him. This was a wonderful misunderstanding. This was the legendary mistakes have mistakes, causing everything to be right by a fluke. Through this exchange, Jun Dashao also instantly understood the source of the 9 serenities and 14 masters' resentment. In fact, since the 9 serenities and 14 masters had once followed Jun Moxie, they were naturally very familiar with his elusive movements. So, following the clues, they naturally linked it to the mysterious 9 firmament first master. In addition, Jun Moxie was really too young, and his own cultivation could not enter the discerning eyes of the 9 serenities and 14 masters. In the eyes of this madman, the 9 firmament first master was probably a peerless expert of the same level as him, or even a little higher. How could he only have the cultivation of a mere holy emperor? So, naturally, he identified Jun Dashao as the disciple of the mysterious expert. In fact, if one were to speculate according to common sense, this was really the most reasonable and logical inference. Generally speaking, if one were to encounter 1,000 or 10,000 people like this, it would definitely be impossible for one of them to escape from the master's sect. However, young Master Jun was a freak of nature. He was 1 in a billion. This wonderful misunderstanding, Jun Moxie definitely did not intend to explain. Misunderstanding? Just right. No matter what, the 9 firmament first master could be considered to have helped the 9 serenities and 14 masters a lot that day. This was a huge favor. For an extremely arrogant madman like the 9 serenities and 14 masters, owing someone a favor was a very, very uncomfortable thing. Although if the 9 serenities and 14 masters met the 9 firmament first master, even if they owed him a favor, they might have to argue with him about the origin of this disgusting nickname, but they could not meet Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie was a junior and also the disciple of their benefactor. No matter what, they could not watch him get bullied in front of their eyes, right? They could not even play the role of babysitter, especially when this kid's enemy seemed to be their enemy. So today, there was a situation where the 9 serenities and 14 masters supported Jun Moxie, and what was more interesting was that once there was this misunderstanding, the 9 serenities and 14 masters took care of Jun Moxie ruthlessly, which was reasonable. If they took care of him, there would be no favor, and they would be embarrassed to take it out to show off. If they did not take care of him, they would feel bad. It seemed that when they met the 9 firmament first master again in the future, they would not be able to raise their heads. So today, the 9 serenities and 14 masters played the role of a sullen babysitter. Of course, if he knew the truth, that Jun Moxie was the so-called 9 firmament first master, he would definitely beat this kid into a pig's head. But unfortunately, he did not know, and he might not know in this lifetime. Of course, if Jun Dashao felt that his strength had risen to the same level as the 9 serenities and 14 masters, he might tell him the truth. Because at that time, Jun Moxie would no longer be afraid of being beaten into a pig's head. Although the 14th young master was feeling resentful and unwilling, he still had to put in some effort. But Jun Moxie was feeling extremely happy and confident in his heart. As the two of them spoke, the expressions of the 3 protectors became uglier and uglier. There was no other reason than that the situation was gradually turning unfavorable for the Holy Land. the 9 serenities and 14 masters looked at Chu Wu Hui and finally felt a little better. Chu Wu Hui's expression right now was no longer as smug as before. It had long become as black as the bottom of a pot. Swallowing live earthworms, a whole 1,000 of them, and these earthworms were all dug out by him one by one. Heavens! Thinking of this bet, Chu Wu Hui felt like he was better off dead than alive, wanting to cry but having no tears. Jun Mo Xia looked at the scene, and his heart also began to beat faster. The current situation was still with the 7 demon battle formation attacking from one side, while the 7 members of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer team were moving more and more skillfully and naturally. And every time they moved, there would be faint starlight flowing out, and their figures also seemed more and more illusory. Clearly, the crucial blow that would decide the outcome of the battle and the fate of life and death was about to arrive. Last night, I worked overtime to study and revise. Today's exam was successfully passed. 99 points, After returning, I immediately started writing, until now. Chapter 888. As for the situation before or after this strike, it would no longer be important. In the current situation, although the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops' 7 stars Big Dipper formation had a real advantage, no matter how great the advantage was, it wasn't equivalent to victory, much less an absolute victory. Jun Moxie wanted a complete victory, not a Pyrrhic victory. But this was a battle between second-level saints, and both sides had extremely strong vitality. Even if it was one side that was in a disadvantageous situation, as long as they were determined, they could still fight until both sides suffered. The reason why Jun Mo Xia was able to kill a saint with a single sword strike was firstly because he was able to launch a sneak attack and catch Xia Dongting off guard. Secondly, his strength had far surpassed Xia Dongting's, allowing him to use Xian Qi that was several times stronger than his opponent to completely destroy Xia Dongting's meridians, causing him to lose his last chance to struggle. Otherwise, with Xia Dongting's strength as a 3rd-level saint and his powerful self-recovery ability, he would not have died so silently. As long as he was not dismembered on the spot. Even if an expert stabbed a vital point in the heart, or even shattered the heart, a saint could still use his Xian Qi to forcefully seal the circulation of the organs in his chest and stop his blood circulation. This situation could be maintained for at least a day, and he would not lose his life immediately. But right now, the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer team had to face such a dangerous situation. If the 7 of them, who shared a deep bond with each other, were to fight to the death at the same time, the combat power that the other party would erupt with would definitely be able to drag the 7-star battle formation down with them to the netherworld. So, Jun Moxie's arrangement was like this from the beginning. Injuring 10 fingers was better than breaking 1 finger. From the start, they would be in the tightest state of defense and counterattack. They would not take the initiative to attack. They would slowly control the situation, accumulate their advantage, and then turn it into an absolute victory. Then, they would suddenly attack, risking being injured. The 7 of them would attack 1 person at the same time. They would strive to dismember that person in 1 attack and kill him on the spot. The only way was to kill 1 person first and break the alliance of the 7 people in the 7 demon battle formation so that the other party's offense would not be at its strongest. Even if the other party exploded again because of the death of their brother and launched the craziest revenge attack, as long as their side went into a tight defensive state again, they would be safe until the other party's offense weakened. Then, they could counterattack. Of course, the most ideal situation was that one of the enemies had died, and the other 6 were all injured due to their brotherhood. They were in great pain and no longer had the strength to fight. Then, they could directly follow up on their victory and kill all the other 6. There were many variables in these 2 situations, but there was only one outcome. They had to kill all the enemies without losing a single person. Right now, the battle was progressing in the direction that Jun Mo had predicted. Sword light rained down like a storm. Everyone in the seven demon battle formation was still calm and composed. Although they had been the main attackers since the beginning of the battle and had consumed a considerable amount of energy, they were not anxious or impatient. The opponent's strength was beyond their expectations. But in their hundreds of years of fighting, they were no strangers to this kind of stalemate. As long as they were still in control of the offense, even if the initiative of the battle was in the hands of the opponent, it would not be a big deal. Any high-level martial artist wouldn't be unfamiliar with the principle of defending for too long is bound to lose. Our combat prowess for a long period of time was quite impressive. It wasn't that no one had tried to use attrition tactics to wear us seven brothers down, but in the end, they were the ones who were worn down instead. And looking at the seven people on the other side, their cultivation and skills were inferior to ours. Could they be the only exception? The saber light was like a screen that covered everything. The speed of the seven black figures became faster and faster, and the frequency at which they changed positions with each other became more and more frequent. Often, before one of them could reach his designated position, the other six had already jumped up and changed positions in the air. However, the saber light was like a screen, and they did not slack off at all. Suddenly, the sky was filled with white light, and the original black figure had completely disappeared. Only a silver starlight was left, flying back and forth in the field. In the rapid movement, with the power of the Big Dipper formation, the seven-star sword formation successfully borrowed the power of the stars in the sky, transforming itself into a mystical white light. Just as the onlookers were exclaiming, the pleasing sword light expanded wildly, and suddenly burst out with colorful lights, dazzling and eye-catching. At this moment, the sword light was like the blazing sun in the sky, so brilliant that it could not be looked at. Despicable! In the battle formation, there was an angry curse, and suddenly the sound of metal clashing rang out. When the seven people of the seven demon battle formation saw this strange scene, the seven people, who had been enemies for a long time, immediately put up 120% of their attention and vigilance. But they never expected that the seven people of the other side would rush up one by one in a strict order, and suddenly raise their arms and thrust their swords. At this moment, the big swords in their hands were like long swords, stabbing forward. This was undoubtedly a very strange move. Moreover, there was clearly a distance of more than 10 feet between the two sides. Could it be that they wanted to rush over? Just as this thought flashed through their minds, the seven demon battle formation simultaneously prepared to receive the opponent's charge. At this moment, the most unbelievable and despicable move suddenly appeared. The blades in the hands of the seven black-robed men suddenly shot out a ray of blade light at the same time. Like a meteor, the ray of light left the blade and flew towards the seven black-robed men at the same time. Scabbard against scabbard, knife against knife, gods and ghosts helplessly howled together. Since ancient times a man must be ruthless, and he will not bow when he kills all his enemies. It was that unfathomable saber strike. The seven people raised their swords to block at the same time, but the strength of the opponents throwing heaven and earth was too great, causing the seven people's hands to feel slightly numb. And at this time, the seven rows of saber waves converged to form a mountain of sabers, slashing down towards the person in the center of the seven demon battle formation. The saber light at this moment was abnormally beautiful, actually far surpassing the flickering saber light from before. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that there was definitely something strange about these seven sabers that had just been unsheathed. Yes, there was something strange, and it was not a small one. This was the true killing move. The saber within the saber was the divine weapon that had never appeared before. This kind of divine weapon was not the only three that Chu Wu Hui had said, but each of the 300 people had one. The starting point of this battle would be decided by this saber. At this moment, the seven fiend battle formation made three fatal mistakes. First, they did not expect the opponent's saber to have a sheath. Second, they did not expect the opponent's saber to be a divine weapon. Third, they did not expect the opponent to attack the core of the seven-demon battle formation. Whether it was the front or the back, it would be easier to deal with than the core of the formation. So they had been paying attention to the opponent's defense and counterattack, keeping a close watch on the front and back. But at this moment, they discovered that their estimations were completely wrong. The saber light was bright and dazzling, like a demon from hell opening its mouth and revealing its sinister teeth. In the heart of the formation, the leader of the seven-demon battle formation used all of his strength to block the scabbard that had just been shot at him, and rushed to block it. With a crisp, dang sound, the first saber slashed fiercely on his long sword like a thunderbolt. The opponent's attack was a full-force saber that had been prepared for an unknown amount of time, a sure-kill saber without holding back. But he had reacted hastily. Although the saber in his hand could be considered a rare weapon, compared to the divine weapon that Jun Moxie had forged using immortal techniques, it was not just a single level. After the Xian-Qi clashed, the saber and sword collided head-on. With a light sound, the sword broke. The saber continued to slash down without any pause. Blood splattered everywhere. This saber slashed right into the shoulder of the leader of the Seven Demon Alliance, and the powerful saber momentum almost reached his chest. At the same time, the powerful force pressed his entire body down, knee-deep into the ground. He roared and struck out with a backhand palm, hitting the chest of the man in black. Under the counterattack of his tyrannical Xian-Qi, the man in black let out a muffled groan, and the long saber was lifted from his shoulder with a streak of blood. He was sent flying through the air, and both of them spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. But then, almost without any difference, the second saber slashed on his left shoulder. His shoulder blade was instantly cut through, and the saber slashed straight down, also not reaching the position of his chest. The leader of the Seven Demon Alliance roared and kicked the man in black's lower abdomen, sending him flying along with his saber. Along with the blood dripping from his body, at the same time, the Xian-Qi circulated wildly, and in an instant, his entire left shoulder, which was about to fly out of his body, quickly retracted, as if it was healing automatically, but there was only despair left on his face, because the third and fourth sabers slashed down at the same time, accurately hitting the same position as the second saber. With a swoosh, the left half of his body, which had yet to be retracted, finally flew out with a "paw" sound. This was not the end. The fifth and sixth saber slashed down like lightning, striking into the wound of the first saber. At this time, the leader of the Seven Demon Alliance no longer had any strength to resist. He screamed at the sky, a scream that did not sound like a human's voice, and watched helplessly as the right half of his body, including his shoulder and arm, flew out with the saber. His right hand, which had flown out, was still tightly holding onto his long sword. His eyes looked at his own long sword, revealing a look of reluctance and unwillingness. His internal organs were clearly exposed on both sides of his body. Blood was dripping and steam was rising, but his legs were still retreating. How could he not know that he had no hope of survival? But he was the leader, and he had the responsibility of being the leader. He clearly knew what kind of blow it would cause to his brothers if he died on the spot. So, even if he had to die, he had to keep his last breath. At least, he had to say one more sentence. That sentence might be able to help the other 6 brothers leave a last chance of survival. Unfortunately, the heavens did not follow his wishes, and he forever lost this chance. Chapter 889. The third chapter. 4,000 words. Today, 10,000 words have already been read. He wanted to shout. He wanted to say, "Don't worry about me," or "Take revenge for me." As long as he could say it, his brothers might still be able to regain their senses and not fall into excessive grief on the spot, or perhaps they might even give him a corresponding price. But the moment he opened his mouth, another snow-white saber had already pierced through his throat at lightning speed. His teeth and throat were shattered at the same time, and even his tongue was instantly turned into a pile of minced meat. At the same time, another saber sliced through his waist, and his already broken body was completely dismembered. Another flash of saber light, and an incomplete head flew into the air. In midair, the eyes of this head were still staring fiercely, and they were filled with despair and anxiety. Because he had already seen that his brothers had completely lost control because of his death. Everyone was looking at him, dumbfounded, filled with grief, and had long forgotten where they were. The head was still spinning in midair, and his eyes turned weakly a few times. When he turned towards his brothers, he revealed a pleading expression. "Don't be too grieved. Right now you should first pay attention to the enemy." But the 6 brothers who had already fallen into absolute grief did not see the look in his eyes, nor did they see the last warning that came from him. Finally, the eyes of the head that had already lost its body, no longer had the strength to turn. The 2 eyeballs were fixed on an expression that was burning with worry, frozen for a long time. All of this seemed to take a long time to describe, but in reality, from the moment the 7-star battle formation took the initiative to attack, shooting out the scabbard, and finally chopping off this person's head in midair, all of the time that had passed was at most half a breath's time. In fact, half a breath's time was even less. But in this time that did not even have the time to blink an eye, what happened was actually extremely cruel. The head of the 7-demon battle formation, the core of the 7-demon battle formation, went from being completely unharmed to suddenly being dismembered into pieces of flesh that filled the sky, with his head separated from his body. Everyone on the side of the Holy Lands was stunned at the same time. Everyone had already sensed that the battle had taken an unexpected turn, but no one had thought that this turn would come so quickly, so thoroughly, and so cruelly. The 2 pieces of the body that flew out earlier were still flying in the air, and had yet to land, and a head covered in blood was still slowly turning in the air. Everyone fell into a state of shock. His 6 brothers, almost disregarding their lives, pounced towards the place where the body of the head of the 7-demon battle formation was smashed to pieces, but the 7-star Big Dipper battle formation did not stop. Not only did they not fall into a daze, but they also immediately launched an even sharper, more deadly and vicious attack when the enemy sank into grief. 2 of them had already been injured by the 7 fiends' desperate counterattack. Both their internal and external injuries were very serious. After all, it was a near-death attack from a level 2 saint. It was not something that could be easily endured. However, they still formed this formation and charged forward with all their might like mad tigers. The 6 people in the 7-demon battle formation could not believe their eyes. They had been together for their entire life, and they had never been apart for 500 or 600 years. His biological brother, who shared the same mother, was dismembered alive right in front of his eyes. What kind of a blow was this? In an instant, everyone's eyes were bloodshot, and their minds were completely blank. Their hearts were throbbing with pain, as if the one who had died was themselves. They practically forgot about time, forgot about everything. It was as if the entire world had stopped at this moment. They screamed and screamed their big brother's name crazily as they advanced towards the pile of minced meat. They did not notice that the enemy's dazzling blades had already neared them viciously in the Holy Land's camp. He Ji Chio and Hai Wu Ye shouted at the same time, "Careful!" The 2 holy emperors were extremely powerful, but the 6 brothers of the 7-demon battle formation did not seem to hear them at all. Even though their bodies were shaken to the point that they almost flew up from the ground, they still did not wake up. At this moment, there was nothing else in their hearts or minds. So much so that he didn't even have the time to think about revenge. What filled his heart was only pain. Extreme pain. At this moment, The 7 blades slashed down with the sound of howling wind. Like a torrential downpour. Blood splattered everywhere. Merciless. But the 6 people who were enduring all of this did not seem to feel anything. They stood there in a daze, not even using any xian qi to protect themselves. Hai Wuye roared, "Stop!" Suddenly, his figure moved as if he was flying. Before he arrived, his longsword had already shot out tens of thousands of sword lights. If they were really hit by this sword light, even the 7 saints would inevitably be heavily injured, and some might even die on the spot. After all, they had been fighting for such a long time. Their xian qi had already been depleted to less than half of their usual level. There were even some who were injured. On the opposite side, Mei Shuyan's clothes were whiter than snow. She flew out like a white cloud. As she flew, a majestic sword appeared in her hand. She waved it in the air and said calmly, "Holy Emperor of the Sea, this is a battle of life and death. Breaking your promise and interfering is a disgrace to your status as the Holy Emperor." Hai Wuye's sword light was as dazzling as the stars. But Mei Shuyan's sword light was like snow covering the sun. It was enough to cover all glory. In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them were already facing each other in the sky. Starlight shot up to the 9 heavens and snowflakes filled the sky. With a few light clangs, the 2 of them, both dressed in white, actually merged into a snow-white ball in midair. "Stop!" Chu Wu Hui roared angrily. Their swords clashed one last time. Hai Wuye somersaulted back and stood in the air. But Mei Shuyan was facing Hai Wuye. She pointed her sword at Hai Wuye, her eyes locked onto him. Her slender body floated backwards slowly. Her white robes fluttered and her black hair flew like a waterfall. In this miserable battlefield, she added a touch of gentleness and charm in this short exchange. Mei Shuyan actually had the upper hand. A win is a win. A loss is a loss. Hai Wuye, are you really such a sore loser? Chu Wu Hui's eyes were slightly red. This is a battle of life and death. Even if you can't bear it, you have to bear it. Even if everyone dies, you have to bear it. This battle is a battle of the face of the 3 holy lands. You interfered on your own. What is the meaning of this? Is the 10,000-year reputation of the Holy Lands something that you can trample on like this? Hai Wuye gritted his teeth and said with grief and indignation, But they are too vicious." "Vicious? Vicious is the nature of an opponent. In a battle of life and death, you have to resort to all means. Vicious is the most correct way to do things." Chu Wu Hui snorted. From the start, both sides had already set the rules. Only when one side is completely wiped out will this battle end. This is the meaning of starting with a living person and ending with a dead person. Don't you understand? If the people of the Holy Lands die, this old man will also feel terrible. But no matter how terrible it is, you have to bear it. Rules are rules. You can throw away your life, but you can't lose your face. Chu Wu Hui's voice was harsh and his face was filled with rage. Hai Wuye slowly landed on the ground. Looking at the tragic scene, he couldn't help but tear up in this instant. All the second-level saints of the 6 holy lands were slaughtered on the spot. Not a single one was left alive. There were even a few who were killed without even retaliating. Even in death, their faces were still filled with grief. Jun Moxie looked at the battlefield and sighed silently. Mei Shuyan's words rang out in his heart. Blood brothers, living together for hundreds of years without ever leaving each other. Their tacit understanding and teamwork has already reached the peak of the world. But while there are benefits to having a deep relationship, it is also the greatest disadvantage. When one person is injured, the other 6 are sad. When one person dies, the hearts of the other 6 die. These 7 brothers were indeed like this. Right now, Chu Wu Hui could be said to be both sad and angry. From the way he saw it, Hai Wuye's sudden interference was an utter humiliation. Not only did he lose face, he also brought shame to the 3 holy lands. Adding on to the fact that he had just lost 2 rounds, His mood was extremely gloomy. In an instant, all the gloominess in his heart exploded out. Of course, there was another main reason. 9 serenities and 14 masters was still watching from the side. That old man was also one of the witnesses. If he found an excuse to explode, Hai Wuya would most likely end up like these 7 people, lying on the ground. Qiao Ying and Qing Yin Zhao's expressions were also ugly. With the highest authority of the Holy Lands and the 3 guardians of Heaven's Saint Palace present, as well as the number 1 lunatic in the world, 9 serenities and 14 masters, as the judge, there was actually such an act of going back on their word and going back on their word. If they were not present, how unscrupulous would this bunch of people be? From this, it could be imagined that all the rumors before were groundless. 9 serenities and 14 masters watched all of this coldly from the side. Lengling said, "For tens of thousands of years, the 3 holy lands have long become rotten to the extreme. They do things according to their own preferences, and only know how to protect their own interests. As for other things, they no longer care about them. In their eyes, they are the righteous side, and when they do things righteously, they do not care about the trifles. The scene before us is proof of that." He laughed sinisterly and said, "As a secular person, if they ignore the law, they will inevitably end up in jail, or even be beheaded in public. But the pugilistic world is a relatively lax place. The only place that is lax is the lack of the law enforcers of the pugilistic world. Just one sentence of 'in the pugilistic world, one cannot do as they please,' is enough to disregard everything. Everyone does what they want, and everyone is lawless. But there are always some rules that have been passed down since ancient times, and no one dares to violate them. Even if he's a heinous criminal, he still has a lot of scruples." He let out a long sigh and continued, "But now, the 3 holy lands have been eliminating all dissidents for tens of thousands of years, and they no longer have any opponents in the world. Once there are no opponents, there are no more restrictions. So the current 3 holy lands have completely changed. Their actions have become more and more arrogant, and they no longer put the so-called rules of the pugilistic world in their eyes. If there is a conflict with their own interests, the so-called rules of the pugilistic world are like a piece of waste paper. But who would have thought that if this goes on, you guys will definitely be more dangerous than the strange races? After all, the strange races are not of our race. Even if they enter the Xian continent, the only thing that awaits them is destruction. But you guys are destroying this world, the world that you claim to protect." The 9 serenities and 14 masters looked at Hai Wuya coldly. "Just like you guys, as people of the pugilistic world, if you can even throw the basic rules of the pugilistic world and keep your promises to the back of your minds in the blink of an eye, then no matter how great your mission is, you have already become a malignant tumor that must be removed. If left unchecked, it will only rot away. And the 3 holy lands have already been rotting away for tens of thousands of years. Chu Wu Hui, the 3 of you can still be considered to be untainted by the filth of the world. This is truly worthy of celebration." When the 9 serenities and 14 masters finished speaking, Qiao Ying, Qing Yin Zhao, and Chu Wu Hui suddenly froze. Then, they began to sweat profusely. For tens of thousands of years, the 3 holy lands had always been fighting against dissidents. Their ultimate goal was to rule the world. And the 3 holy lands had always been the protectors of the Xian continent. Doing things in the name of justice, they were naturally unbridled and unrestrained. And the Heaven Saint Palace had never felt that there was anything wrong with the way the 3 holy lands did things. Instead, when the 3 holy lands were in trouble, they gave their full support. They looked forward to the day when the 3 holy lands truly controlled the world. That would be a blessing for the entire continent, of course. If it was according to the standards of the 3 holy lands 10,000 years ago, or even 5 or 6,000 years ago, this might not be unreasonable. But as the opposing forces were destroyed one by one, the three Holy Lands finally ascended to the peak of power in the continent. And they were the ones who dominated the world. Even Xiao Ying, Qing Yin Xiao, and Chu Wu Hui felt from the bottom of their hearts that the achievements of the three Holy Lands were truly unprecedented, far surpassing their ancestors. They were extremely gratified. Controlling the continent, ruling over the world, the moment the Holy Lands appeared, no one could compete with them. This was undoubtedly the pinnacle of glory. But now that the three of them had been enlightened by the 9 serenities and 14 masters, they suddenly realized that if there were no more opponents, the only thing they would have to face would be their own internal corruption completely changing. Humans always loved to fight. Fighting with enemies, constantly struggling on the line between life and death, would instead stimulate a person's boundless fighting spirit, surpassing themselves time and time again. But what if there were no more enemies? The entire world was torrential, without a single enemy. Flattery and bootlicking were everywhere. People would naturally change. There was an even more serious problem. If there were no more enemies, who could they fight with? So they had to fight with themselves, with the thoughts of fame and profit in their hearts. But how many people could win against themselves in the end? So everyone was controlled by fame and profit, and they began to fight amongst themselves, fighting for power and profit. The originally harmonious relationship between the three Holy Lands was now nothing more than an empty shell. On the surface, they were full of smiles and harmony, but in the dark, they were scheming and plotting against each other. Even within the same Holy Land, they had to fight with each other, resorting to all sorts of methods. After such a long time, who would still care about the rules of the pugilistic world? Who would still follow the rules of the pugilistic world? Because these rules were originally set by these people. Who would put them in their eyes? But, a pugilistic world without rules and morality, what kind of pugilistic world was it? The more they thought about it, the more afraid the three of them became. If this continued, the three Holy Lands would not need to have any opponents to completely collapse. Chapter 890. 14th Brother. Today's warning is truly enlightening. Chu Wu Hui bowed respectfully towards 9 serenities and 14 masters, and said sincerely, "If the Holy Lands still have a future, it will all be because of Brother 14th's words today. Although you and I are enemies, this old man will always remember this kindness. Even if I kill Brother 14th one day, I will definitely carve Brother 14th's name on the Heaven Saint Palace's sage tablet." 9 serenities and 14 masters didn't know whether to laugh or cry. With just the 3 Holy Lands, if you want to kill me, is that even possible? Chu Wu Hui, don't have such sweet dreams. Also, don't sully this young master's name. Carving my name on the sage tablet, are you thanking me? That is an insult to this young master. Whether it's a dream or not, we'll talk about it later. Chu Wu Hui chuckled. Gritting his teeth, he stomped his feet and said, "For Brother 14th's words today, this old man will eat those 1,000 earthworms." So you were originally planning to go back on your words? The 9 nether 14th young master sized him up and said meaningfully, as expected of someone from the 3 Holy Lands, to even dare to renege on a bet with this young master. Today, I've truly witnessed what it means to have a crooked upper beam and a crooked lower beam. Chu Wu Hui's face turned red and he laughed. At this time, Xiao Ying and Qing Yin Xiao also bowed to 9 serenities and 14 masters, thanking him for his words. 9 serenities and 14 masters sighed. Who would have thought that this young master's words would actually help my opponent? Everyone laughed, but Chu Wu Hui and the other 2 felt extremely heavy in their hearts. What 9 serenities and 14 masters had said was the truth, and the situation had already worsened to a certain extent. Just how should they turn things around? The 3 of them furrowed their brows and thought for a long time, but they couldn't think of anything, and sighed at the same time. Chu Wu Hui announced listlessly. Third round, the evil monarch's side wins. Jun Moxie chuckled lightly as he watched his 7 subordinates return to their camp. Turning to Chu Wu Hui, he smiled and said, Senior Chu, many thanks for letting me win. That exquisite lotus already belongs to this junior. His words were clearly a reply to Chu Wu Hui's earlier words. But right now, Chu Wu Hui had nothing to say. The truth was already like this, what else could he say? Forcefully holding on was even more shameful. Today, the three Holy Lands and even the Heaven Saint Palace had already lost all their face. There were a total of 6 rounds, and the opponent had already won 3 of them. Saying that half of the bet was already in his hands was the most conservative way to put it. Xiaoying pondered for a while before saying, Jun Moxie, there's no need to continue this battle. Today's battle, we give up. Our Holy Land admits defeat. We will definitely not go back on our word about the exquisite lotus, and we will definitely hand it over on time. Let's just forget about it, how about it? Xiao Ying was an intelligent person, and her thoughts were sharp. Using the previous 3 battles as a basis, she carefully calculated the situation. All the signs pointed to the fact that today's battle was really too strange. When the Holy Lands sent out 3 people, Jun Moxie had a 3-man battle formation waiting for him. When they sent out 5 people, he had a 5-man formation waiting for him. When they sent out 7 people, it was still the same. Although there were still 3 more matches to be fought, the 3 Guardians had already lost all their confidence. The strength of the people on Jun Mosie's side was simply too abnormal. The strength of the people sent out for the first 3 matches was clearly not as good as the people sent out by the Holy Land. In fact, the difference was not just a little bit. Whether it was Xian Qi, cultivation, or mental state, they were all inferior. But they were able to rely on those 3 mysterious formations to turn defeat into victory. Furthermore, the final result of every battle was to completely annihilate their opponents, while their own side retreated unscathed. Based on this, it wasn't hard to come up with a conclusion. Since Jun Moxie could have a 3-man, 5-man, and 7-man formation, what was so strange about him having other multi-man formations? Even if the Holy Land sent out 10, or even 20 people, Jun Moxie's side would still have a formation to deal with them. Furthermore, the formation would only get stronger and stronger, and the chances of victory would be extremely slim. Especially when the last round was He Zhiqiu's battle against Jun Moxie. Just based on the battle between Hai Wuye and Mei Shuyan, He Zhiqiu had no chance of winning at all. Then, if the battle continued, wouldn't the experts from the Holy Lands be sending themselves to their deaths like moths flying into a flame? If the 6 rounds really ended, the result would most likely be a complete defeat, and all the participants would die. In the end, they would even have to pay up the exquisite lotus. There was no practical meaning to this at all. So Xiao Ying immediately suggested to stop the battle. Without a doubt, this decision of hers was the correct one, and it was extremely wise. Qing Yinshao and Chu Wu Hui had also noticed this. It was just that they were too embarrassed to bring it up due to their status. But it was understandable for Xiao Ying to bring it up. Because Xiao Ying was a woman, she had an innate advantage in this aspect. Men naturally had to keep their promises, but women could. This was the natural privilege of women. Even if the woman's status was extremely high, or even if she was a 1,000-year-old demon, she was still a woman. This was something that no one could doubt, so she could enjoy this privilege. Of course, the old faces of these 2 men also seemed to have secretly blushed. But blushing was still better than dozens of living lives turning into fresh blood on the ground, right? Stop the battle? Admit defeat? Give me the exquisite lotus, and we can forget about this matter? Jun Moxie was slightly taken aback. Right now, his thoughts were not on this matter. Right now, his mind was wandering, thinking about something else. Enforcers of the pugilistic world. When 9 serenities and 14 masters unintentionally said these words, Jun Moxie's heart skipped a beat. This was a completely new term. Who would have thought that 9 serenities and 14 masters would have this kind of awareness, or perhaps the speaker did not mean it, but the listener did. Jun Mosie's heart palpitated with excitement when he heard these words. I've never thought of ruling over the world, nor do I want to rule over the world, but I want to be a person who sets the rules. Since I'm setting the rules, then I definitely need enforcers. Enforcers of the pugilistic world. This would be a transcendent power that existed within the pugilistic world, but also outside the pugilistic world. Once this rule was successfully set, its status would be even higher than the current 3 Holy Lands. And there was only one condition. First, intimidate the 3 Holy Lands into submission, or completely destroy them. Just as he was lost in thought about this matter, Qiao Ying just happened to bring up the request to stop the battle. This caused his brain to not be able to wrap around it for a moment. His eyes looked at Qiao Ying, and he only uttered twice. But in the eyes of outsiders, this lecher was looking at Qiao Ying with shining eyes, and was actually enchanted by her beauty, staring at her in a daze. So much so that whatever request she made, he would immediately agree to please the beauty, not to mention that the crowd could not bear to watch. Even Mei Shiyan couldn't help but want to twist his ear a few times when she saw him acting like a hooligan. What kind of person was this? Going, when he saw a beauty, wasn't it embarrassing? Good. Since young Master Jun has no objections, then this matter is decided. This battle shall end here. Qiao Ying said with an unquestionable tone. But this sentence of hers immediately received resistance from 3 sides. Wait a minute, what do you mean I have no objections? Did I express my opinion just now? Jun Moxie's face was gloomy. Even if you're a woman and have the authority to twist words and force logic, you can't just come to a conclusion for me like this, can you? Even if you're a woman, you're not my woman, right? Fight to the end, fight to the death. The battle is only half over, how can you just give up like this? Who knows, maybe your Holy Lands will be able to turn the tables, and turn the tables. The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters were obviously very dissatisfied. Seeing the blood and corpses of the people from the 3 Holy Lands, he was feeling very happy. This was a rare show to enjoy. How could it be cancelled just like this? Naturally, he was not willing to give up, and even those words that even he did not believe came out of his mouth so easily. That's right. We haven't lost yet. The battle is only half over, we still have half a chance, and it's not impossible to turn defeat into victory. Especially I still have that battle with Jun Moxie. It cannot be cancelled just like this. I object to this suggestion. He Qiu's pale face was completely red, and his eyes were filled with extreme grief and anger. Losing 3 rounds in a row was still secondary, but the most unacceptable thing was that the 15 experts that went out to fight had all been sacrificed, and they were even killed by the opponent right in front of his eyes. And the opponent did not even have a single person die. How could he feel at ease with such a loss? The 3 Holy Lands had been famous in the Xian continent for tens of thousands of years, and when had they ever suffered such a defeat? But now this evil monarch had appeared out of nowhere and completely suppressed the 3 Holy Lands. If they ended the battle with Qiao Ying's suggestion, it would be as if they had been beaten to a pulp by the opponent. How could these arrogant experts of the Holy Lands endure this? And most importantly, the exquisite lotus that the Heaven Saint Palace had always viewed as their most precious treasure, if they were to lose it just like this and word of this spread out, wouldn't they, Hai Wu Ye, and the rest die of embarrassment? Even if they could leave this place alive today, they would probably have to bury their faces in their pants every time they came out in the future. He Qiu, could it be that you want all the experts of the Holy Lands to die and turn into corpses before you're willing to admit defeat? Qiao Ying Lengling looked at He Qiu and asked sternly. He Qiu froze for a moment, then suddenly roared. So the protectors are actually afraid of losing us, and that's why they made such a decision? Even if this old man dies here today, I will definitely not admit defeat so easily. His body trembled slightly as he said in a hoarse voice, "That's the most precious treasure of our palace, the exquisite lotus. Ah! It's something that our heaven-sent palace cannot live without. Don't tell me the three of us are not clearer about this than you are," Chu Wu Hui Lengling said. "He Chiu, you only need to follow orders now. As for the rest, you don't need to care. The heaven-sent palace is not up to a junior like you to decide." Chu Wu Hui's words were extremely heavy, and He Chiu was instantly speechless. Chapter 891. Young Master Jun, let alone the fact that you've already agreed to it, even if you deny it now, there's no meaning. Cheng Yin Shao said indifferently. Even if you want to continue the battle, there's no longer anyone to fight against. Could it be that you guys intend to fight against your own people? If that's the case, I'm more than happy to admire such a marvelous battle formation. There's no harm in fighting a few more rounds. Jun Mosie's eyes widened. He had never imagined that this Lord Protector would speak so shamelessly. Was this really the legendary senior expert? Was this really a legendary existence? 3 esteemed guardians, even if we lose the next 2 battles without fighting, us 3 old fellows still have a gentleman's agreement with young Master Jun. Hai Wuya said. That is, regardless of the outcome of the battle, the 3 of us old fellows would like to spar with young Master Jun for a while. This matter, we hope that Lord Protectors can agree to it. Spar? Xiao Ying and the other 2 looked at each other, somewhat tempted. If there wasn't a life-and-death battle, the 3 of them would also be able to see Jun Moxie's true strength. This was not a bad choice. As for the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, they were also extremely tempted. If there was this battle, perhaps they would be able to see the unique skills of the 9 Firmament First Old Master from Jun Moxie? He hadn't forgotten that he still had a battle with that 9 Firmament First Old Master. Right now, he didn't have the slightest bit of confidence, seeing that the 4 old demons who'd lived for thousands of years were looking at him with great interest. Jun Moxie laughed bitterly. It seems like I haven't agreed yet. What are you guys doing? Do all the benefits belong to the Holy Lands? Young Master Jun, what are you saying? Aren't we discussing this with you? Cheng Yin Shao said. If you really don't agree, then Chu Wu Hui and I will spar with you. In any case, the 2 of us are from the Holy Lands, so it doesn't count as breaking the agreement. Cheng Yin Shao was being a little shameless. This doesn't count as breaking the agreement? Jun Dashao was taken aback by these words. He thought to himself that he couldn't handle just one Xiao Ying that day. If there were 2 of them at the same time, then it wouldn't be a spar. He would be asking to be tortured, however. It seemed like the exquisite lotus was already in his hands. If he insisted on fighting to the end, then these 3 people might not let him go. That might backfire, and it might not be a good thing. Since this battle is mainly a spar, there's no need for both of us to fight to the death. Out of the 3 of you, who will be the one to fight? He Chiu, is that you? Chu Wu Hui asked. There's no need to trouble Brother He for this battle. Allow this old man to spar with this evil monarch. From the Holy Lands camp, a person walked out slowly. It was Zhang Mubai. However, at this moment, his face was flushed red, and he was in high spirits. He was calm and composed. He didn't look like he was in a sorry state before. Zhang Mubai's tone was very heavy when he said the words spar. There was a heavy feeling of suppression in his tone. 9 Serenities and 14 Masters' eyes narrowed, and he began to observe Zhang Mubai's body carefully. He was confident that no one in this world would be able to undo the yin-yang refining soul restriction that he had left behind. But now, Zhang Mubai was completely fine. How could he not be shocked? After observing for a while more, 9 Serenities and 14 Masters' eyes flashed. So that's how it is. The Xian aura around Zhang Mubai's body was extremely strong. This was an aura that shouldn't appear on the body of a holy emperor. From the looks of it, This person must have used some kind of extremely powerful yet evil method to forcefully suppress his injuries. At the same time, it also temporarily suppressed the restriction that 9 serenities and 14 masters had placed on him. And there was only one such evil method in the history of the Holy Lands, the blood-rupturing body technique. This was the most extreme method. Once used, the person would not be able to live for long. But during this period of time, no matter how serious the injury was, his strength could be restored immediately, and it could even be doubled temporarily. Most importantly, this method absolutely could not be used by one person alone. There must be an outsider to help operate it, and then the person himself must cooperate in order to operate it. It seemed that at this moment, Jean Moubai was prepared to die. Was he planning to drag Jun Mo-sie along with him? 9 serenities and 14 masters' eyes flashed, and he couldn't help but ponder, all right. This young master is also very interested in exchanging pointers with Saint Emperor Jean. Jun Mo-sie's lips curled into a cold smile as he replied. Similarly, he emphasized the words learned from each other with great emphasis. Jean Moubai's sneak attack in the Tian Fa forest had almost caused Jun Moxie to be consigned to eternal damnation. This was secondary. The most important thing was that the fate of the Qian Sun Serpent Queen was still unknown. This kind of deep-rooted hatred was something that Jun Moxie had always kept in his heart. At this moment, seeing him take the initiative to jump out, it was like the meeting of enemies. His eyes were exceptionally red, and he agreed without hesitation. The two people facing each other were both smiling faintly, staring at each other indifferently. However, an invisible killing intent was quietly brewing, growing, and spreading. Qiao Ying, Chu Wu Hui, and the rest couldn't help but shake their heads and sigh. These two people were still talking about Spar, but the situation between the two of them could be seen by anyone with a discerning eye. A battle of life and death was imminent. Jean Moubai had disregarded his status and sneak attacked Jun Moxie before. This was something that everyone knew. Jun Moxie had a great hatred for Jean Moubai. This was understandable. But where did Jean Moubai's hatred for Jun Moxie come from? Could it be that, after sneak attacking someone and taking advantage of them, you still need to be so angry? 9 serenities and 14 masters looked at Chu Wu Hui mockingly. So this is the tradition of your holy lands? What a righteous sect! A senior expert sneak attacked a junior and did such a despicable and shameless thing. Now that he saw that the junior was lucky enough to not die, his hatred grew even stronger. This is truly a good tradition, Even if this young master cultivated for another 1,000 or several hundred years, I would still be left in the dust. Not to mention Brother 14th, even this old man is puzzled. Since Jun Moxie did not die, it means that they are not mortal enemies. But where did Jean Moubai get such a strong hatred from? It's really hard to understand, Chu Wu Hui scratched his head and said in confusion. A senior expert like you would naturally not understand. After all, you did not disregard your status and sneak attack a junior. When Holy Emperor Jean sees this young master who should be dead today, he will naturally remember his disgraceful past. My reappearance will also make everyone remember the despicable things that this holy emperor had done in the past. Jun Moxie replied calmly. So, he must kill me. Only then will his heart calm down and return to being the holy emperor that everyone looks up to. Even if he dies, he must drag me along with him. What's so hard to guess? Qiao Ying, Qing Yin Xiao, and Chu Wu Hui looked at each other in dismay. There was actually such a thing in this world? If what Jun Moxie said was true, then Jean Moubai's character could be said to be extremely vile. You can choose not to accept this battle. 9 serenities and 14 masters said in a heavy tone. The meaning behind his words was clear. Yes, I can naturally choose not to accept. I also know that Jean Moubai only has a short while left, but I am not willing to let Jean Moubai die just like this. If Jean Mubai is to die, then he must die in my hands. If he dies in the hands of others, absolutely not. June Moxie said darkly. Not to mention that he's not dead yet. Even if he's already dead, I'll drag him out of hell and kill him again. Because even if he doesn't hate me, I'll still find him to settle the debt he owes me and her. June Moxie took in a deep breath and said word by word, Today's battle is unavoidable. This is the explanation I give to myself, and also the explanation I give to her. With a flash, June Moxie's tall and handsome figure appeared in the center of the arena. 9 serenities and 14 masters, Qiao Ying, Qing Yin Xiao, and the rest were all silent. Among them, Qiao Ying was the most shocked. She felt goosebumps all over her body when she heard June Moxie's last sentence. Others might not know, but she knew very well that ghosts and spirits did exist. When she thought of June Moxie's words, even if he's dead, I'll drag him out of hell and kill him again, she couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. This kind of terrifying resentment, hatred that seeped deep into the bones, was really shocking. A gust of wind blew in the arena. Without saying a word, the two of them actually started fighting. They didn't even need to say any opening words, because to June Moxie and Jean Mubai, those were all meaningless. Jean Mubai didn't have much time left. Every minute and second was precious, and June Moxie couldn't be bothered to waste his breath on such trash. Every word he said was superfluous, but the two of them had the same goal, to kill each other. So, Jean Mubai took out his trump card right from the start. Even before he made his move, his space lock, heaven and earth cage, as well as the unique mysterious sun skill, had already been displayed. Once the mysterious sun skill was displayed, the heaven and earth suddenly became unusually hot, and it became more and more stuffy. Even the wreckage of the corpses in the center of the arena started to emit smoke. Then, with a ting sound, the corpses caught fire, and an indescribable burning smell permeated the air. The flames burned fiercely, and the faces of the onlookers revealed a cautious expression. This battle was very disadvantageous for June Moxie. Although Jean Mubai's use of the blood rupture and body rupture technique had further hastened his death, but after forcefully increasing his cultivation, his strength had already reached the level of the Holy Emperor's level 4. In fact, there was a faint sign of a breakthrough. June Moxie's current strength was at most at the level of the Holy Emperor's level 3. With such a huge difference in strength, how could he resist? Just when the crowd was worried for June Dashao, they saw that June Moxie had actually taken the initiative to attack. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, June Moxie suddenly swept across the sky like a giant white eagle. In a flash, he had already arrived in the sky above Jean Mubai. A cold sword light flashed, and suddenly, there was a glorious and proud aura that rushed into the heaven and earth. It was as if an ancient emperor had suddenly opened his slumbering eyes and exuded an aura of supremacy over the world. Godly sword, blood of yellow flame. It was unsheathed. This time, when it was unsheathed, it would be nourished with the blood of a top-notch holy emperor. Although this top-notch holy emperor's character was very despicable, his cultivation was solid. Once the godly sword was unsheathed, in a split second, the sword light filled the sky. The sky suddenly changed, and the entire sky actually transformed into the color of blood. The color of blood was so thick that it actually suppressed the heat of Jean Mubai's flaming sun mysterious art. And this was only the power of the godly sword itself. June Moxie had not even used his own mysterious art to complement it. Outside the arena, 9 serenities and 14 masters was the first to feel this aura. His eyes could not help but widen, and his face revealed an expression of shock that had never been seen in the past 1,300 years. How is this possible? It's actually a godly sword that's like a demon. 9 serenities and 14 masters blurted out. The sword has a spirit, swallowing the heavens and devouring the earth. Could it be that the legends are true? In this world, there's actually such a mysterious thing? Qiao Ying, Qing Yin Xiao, and Chu Wu Hui also revealed expressions of extreme shock. They were obviously filled with disbelief, but their expressions showed that they hoped that the unbelievable was true. After Zhan Mubai finished his preparations, he had the absolute upper hand in the battle of auras between the two of them. But Jun Mo Xie only needed to draw his sword, and with just the power of the divine sword itself, he was able to instantly flip the situation around. That godly sword could no longer be described as a divine weapon in the ordinary sense. It was exactly as 9 serenities and 14 masters had said. It was a demon-like godly sword. Jun Moxie let out a long roar, and he truly struck down from the sky. The blood of yellow flame let out a light cry, like the cry of a dragon in the sky, and the cry of a phoenix in the 9 heavens. A chilling killing intent surged through the air, revealing a strange sense of thirst for blood. Jun Mo Xie's murderous aura merged perfectly with the blood of Yellow Flame's own murderous aura as he swung his sword, instantly forming a killing aura that could shake the heavens and earth. Killing intent. Once the killing intent reached an absolute amount, it would undergo a qualitative change. This was the so-called killing intent. In the eyes of Qiao Ying and the rest, the current Jun Moxie had already transformed into a supreme emperor wielding a heaven-shaking sword. He stood proudly in the air, releasing a sword that could not be rejected, dodged, or retaliated against. In the eyes of the crowd, killing with this sword was a matter of course. No matter who it was, they could only be killed. If they resisted, it would be treason and heresy. Facing this sword, they could only obey. They could only obey. The 3 protectors lost all color in their faces. When 9 serenities and 14 masters saw Jun Moxie's sword, a dazzling light shone from his eyes. This sword had truly grasped the essence of the word force. Since ancient times, there might not have been many people who could unleash such a sword. And those who could unleash such a sword were all peerless prodigies of their generation, peerless geniuses. Just by seeing this sword, no matter who it was, this trip was already not in vain. This sword was a move that Jun Moxie had tailor-made based on the blood of Yellow Flame, the unique sword. Chapter 892. The one who felt it the most was Zhan Mubai, who was in the middle of the battle. It was said that the onlooker sees the game more clearly than the onlooker. But at this moment, the onlooker sees the game more clearly than the onlooker. Zhan Mubai felt that the person standing in front of him was his supreme ruler. Not only was he ruling over his life, but he was also ruling over his entire soul. Not to mention resisting wholeheartedly, even the slightest bit of rebellious thoughts would be a great disrespect in his heart. It would be a great betrayal to his conscience. His eyes were originally filled with an extreme ruthlessness, but at this moment it had already vanished into thin air. What was left was an indescribable feeling of shock. There was not the slightest bit of strength left in his body, and the world-shaking profound energy contained in his meridians could not be used at all. The long sword that he had been holding tightly in his hand earlier was now difficult to hold, let alone brandishing it at will. There was actually such a tyrannical swordsmanship in this world. Such a mystical technique. What kind of swordsmanship and technique is this? Zhan Mubai watched as the sword light flashed and chopped down on his head. Even though he was in the middle of it all, he still had a sliver of consciousness. At this critical moment of life and death, he suddenly bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. A heart-wrenching pain suddenly assaulted him, and his consciousness actually returned to normal in an instant. In extreme haste, he suddenly raised the sword that was hanging low, and with an extremely hot and sharp sword aura, he met the attack head-on. Zhan Mubai didn't have long to live, and Jun Moxie, who was aware of this, naturally didn't have the slightest bit of mercy, and even lost the thought of toying with this person. He wouldn't allow Zhan Mubai to die from the backlash of the secret technique. Although Jean Mubai had to die, he must die by his own hands. The eyes of the usually calm Jun Moxie were a little red at this moment. He must personally chop off Jean Mubai's head, which was still breathing, in order to dispel the hatred in his heart, and to give justice to his beloved. This battle could be said to be Jun Dashao's most magnificent battle since his debut. Jun Moxie wanted to use his most violent means to completely destroy Jean Mubai in the shortest time possible. From there, he would be able to establish his great reputation as the evil monarch. With the birth of the evil prince, this was the first direct confrontation. He was facing a master of the Holy Emperor. With a crisp sound, the two swords finally clashed. Jun Moxie slashed down from the sky, while Jean Mubai counterattacked from the ground. There was a loud bang, and a visible halo of light formed from the chi field. It continued to radiate outwards. Suddenly, the ground, which had sunk nearly 10 feet deep into the ground, was shaken and sent flying into the air. It was as if a hurricane had struck a wave of snow, sweeping up silver fragments that filled the universe. It was as if the entire space had been shattered in an instant. The ground in a radius of close to 40 zhang was instantly split apart, as if countless huge tree roots were propping up the ground. All of Jean Mubai's methods, including his flaming sun domain, were instantly shattered by the clash of the two. Such might cause the hearts of all the spectating experts to waver. They had long guessed that this evil monarch, Jun Moxie, would definitely be very strong. To be able to reach such a level of strength, how could he possibly not be able to withstand a single blow? But guessing was one thing, and personally witnessing it was another. Furthermore, no one had expected that this evil monarch who had appeared out of nowhere would actually be strong to such an extent. With the strength of a third-level Holy Emperor, he was actually able to suppress a fourth-level Holy Emperor and even gain the upper hand. Furthermore, he had an even more unfathomable and mysterious master behind his back. If the disciple was already like this, then the strength of the master could be imagined. Just how shocking would it be? In an instant, Qing Yin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui's faces changed. With a light whistle, Jun Moxie borrowed the rebounding force of this clash to soar into the sky. Jean Mubai let out a muffled groan, and both his legs were almost completely buried into the ground. With a loud roar, the ground around him began to rumble and explode. And in the center of this explosion, Jean Mubai flew up, chasing after Jun Moxie in midair. In this clash, the treasured sword that Jean Mubai was using, a sword that had withstood hundreds of years of hardships, actually had a huge nick on it, almost breaking in half. This sword of Jean Mubai was extremely famous, and could be said to be a legendary divine sword, battle soul sword. The quality of this sword was unique, and it was indestructible, capable of cutting through hair and cutting through metal like mud. Its sturdiness could be said to be the best in the continent, and it could be said to be the #1 sword in the world. Jean Mubai had only managed to obtain this sword because of a stroke of luck. After obtaining this sword, he swept unhindered through the world, without a single defeat. It could even be said that the reason why he was able to achieve the illustrious reputation of a generation's holy emperor was largely due to this sword. But such a sword, under the attack of Jun Moxie's blood of yellow flame, had actually broken in half. Then, what kind of divine weapon was the sword in Jun Moxie's hands? But then again, if it wasn't for this legendary battle soul sword, how could ordinary weapons be able to defend against Jun Moxie's sure-kill attack with the full power of blood of yellow flame? In the entire world, there were not many weapons that could do such a thing. For the battle soul sword to be able to survive, with only a small crack, it had already lived up to its illustrious reputation. At this moment, Jean Mubai no longer had the time to feel sorry for this divine sword. His eyes and heart were filled with only Jun Moxie, his greatest enemy. Although he was the one who had wronged Jun Moxie, and not the other way around, in his heart, Jun Moxie had to die. This evildoer who had committed the most heinous crimes. He was too despicable. Because of this evildoer, this old man's hundreds of years of clean reputation was completely destroyed. If I don't kill him, I am not a man. The sword light was like a swimming dragon, soaring into the heavens. But above the heavens, an even more brilliant sword light had already come crashing down. June Moxie borrowed the momentum to soar into the sky, and with a somersault, his head was below his feet. With both hands holding the sword, he shouted loudly, "Jean Moubai, die!" Jean Moubai laughed sinisterly, without any intention of dodging. His long sword pierced out quickly. At the same time, his left hand flipped out from his bosom once again. The silent palm wind, carrying a majestic destructive aura, struck towards June Moxie. It was almost the same as the last time, another sneak attack. Unfortunately, there was still a difference from the last time. The last time, June Moxie was completely unprepared, and lacked the strength to resist. But now, not only did June Dashao possess astonishing strength, he had already paid attention to his every move. With a laugh, the sword light flashed, and with a twist, the brazen palm wind from Jean Moubai instantly dissipated into a ball of broken chi, and was shattered into pieces by the blood of yellow flame. With a clang, the two long swords met again in mid-air. With a soft sound, Jean Moubai's battle soul sword was broken into two. The top half flew up with a snow-white sword light, letting out an unwilling cry. June Moxie's eyes flashed, and a mocking light flashed in them. With a spin of his feet, he accurately kicked the broken half of the sword. That broken half of the sword seemed to have a life of its own, and suddenly sped up and turned around, shooting towards Jean Moubai with a speed that was several times faster than before. It was as if the original owner of Jean Moubai was the culprit that caused him to be cut into two. Jean Moubai's sword was broken, and June Moxie's sword chi, along with his own sword chi, was crazily pushed back. For a moment, it was so unbearable that he wanted to vomit blood. At this moment, that broken half of the sword had already shot back. Its power was like thunder. He raised the broken half of the sword in his hand, and with a zheng sound, he had already struck the broken half of the sword away, but at the same time, June Moxie's long sword had already neared his body. The cold sword chi had already caused a layer of goosebumps to appear on Jean Moubai's body. At this moment, Jean Moubai did not care about his own life and death. Facing such a fatal blow, he was still able to maintain his composure. With a maniacal laugh, he threw the broken half of the sword in his hand out, and pierced it straight towards June Moxie's chest. At the same time, his body straightened in midair, and as if he had gone berserk, his hands and feet moved together, and he attacked wildly towards June Moxie. Every attack contained all the Xian energy in his body. He actually completely ignored the incoming fatal blow in front of him. Without a doubt, Jean Moubai was fighting with his life on the line. And it was very obvious that he was fighting with all his might to perish together with his opponent. But in the next instant, June Moxie's entire body suddenly disappeared. And this process of disappearing was extremely short, only an instant. When he reappeared again, he was still at his original position. Even his posture did not change. But in that instant of disappearing, that broken sword had already passed by his original position, flying towards the endless void. This was another strange phenomenon that was hard to explain. It was as if that broken sword was not obstructed by June Moxie's body at all, and was just flying freely in the void. Cheng Yin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui looked at Xiao Ying at the same time. After all, she was the expert in this field. The art of concealment. Xiao Ying shook her head and said, "Although he has the art of concealment, but in a normal sense, the art of concealment is hard to see with the naked eye. But this technique of June Moxie's, it's clear that he's immune to attacks. I also don't understand, it's hard to understand." The shock on the two's faces grew even stronger. When they turned their heads again, they saw a fresh sword stained with fresh blood sticking out of Jean Moubai's back. It was so eye-catching. It was unknown when, but June Moxie had already accurately stabbed that fatal sword into Jean Moubai's heart. This sword had directly pierced through Jean Moubai's heart. Jean Moubai's body trembled, and a fierce light shone in his eyes. He completely ignored the sword that had pierced through his body, and his palms continued to strike fiercely at June Moxie's head. June Moxie laughed coldly and instantly retracted his sword. His body flashed to the side, dodging the attack. When his sword pierced through Jean Moubai's heart, he did not directly activate the art of unlocking Heaven's fortune to destroy Jean Moubai's heart. Because if he did that, it would be too easy on him. Although he had already decided to kill him, he still had some research on how to kill him. He absolutely could not let him off so easily. The sword flashed and suddenly disappeared. June Moxie abandoned his sword and used his palms instead. He roared, "Jean Moubai, prepare to repay your debt." His palms did not have any changes to speak of. They fell straight down, but their auras were magnificent. The strength of the palms was as heavy as a mountain, falling straight down from the sky. Jean Moubai was naturally unwilling to sit and wait for death. He still wanted to try his luck. He forcefully raised his Xian Qi and brazenly struck out with his palms. However, when the four palms collided, Jean Moubai let out a blood-curdling scream. He could not help but spit out a large amount of blood. On his body, the wound that had been sealed by Xian Qi burst open, and blood spurted out from the front and back of his body at the same time. He had hurriedly struck out with his palms. How could the difference between him and June Moxie's full strength be measured in terms of logic? Jean Moubai's body was still falling, but he still continued to struggle. His eyes were filled with unwillingness and unwillingness. June Moxie did not hesitate. He followed closely behind. The power of his palms did not diminish in the slightest. He struck out with his palms in a frenzy. The sound of banging echoed continuously from the sky to the ground. In the beginning, it was still two parties colliding. Later on, it became a one-sided beating. The sound of bones breaking could be heard from the center of the dust-filled arena. The eyebrows of the onlookers twitched wildly. Just by listening to the sound, they could not tell how many bones in Jean Moubai's body had been broken. Suddenly, a long howl was heard from the center of the arena. June Moxie, who was dressed in white, rose into the air. He rose 300 feet into the air. He laughed loudly, "Jean Moubai, when you come out to mingle, you have to repay your debts. This is the end of a despicable person like you." In his hand, there was a human body that looked like a dried salted fish. His entire body was limp. When June Moxie's hand trembled, his body swayed a few times in the air like a snake. It was Jean Moubai. The Holy Emperor's life force was truly extraordinary. Even at this stage, Jean Moubai was still not dead. His eyes were still moving, filled with hatred. But at this moment, he was completely speechless. He could only stare fiercely at June Moxie, as if he wanted to use his venomous gaze to stare at June Moxie to death. June Moxie laughed heartily. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He laughed and said, "Today, I shall use the blood of the Holy Emperor as a sacrifice to my sword." The long sword slashed horizontally. The sword light was like lightning flashing past. Jean Moubai's head flew up, spinning rapidly in the air. The blood of yellow flame let out a soft hum, as if it felt infinite satisfaction. As the head slowly fell down, June Moxie just happened to kick the Holy Emperor's head into powder. The powder scattered in the air like dust. Below, everyone from the 3 Holy Lands had a gloomy expression on their faces. Their eyes were wide open, and their teeth were gritted. June Moxie's actions were obviously a slap to the faces of everyone from the 3 Holy Lands. But they had no choice but to accept it. The 3 guardians were watched by the 9 serenities and 14 masters, so they definitely could not make a move. As for the others, they could make a move, but it would be for nothing. Wasn't water in their brains if they were to give themselves up for free? Jean Moubai's headless corpse fell from the air. Halfway down, a wisp of white smoke suddenly came out from his neck. Under the sunlight, it quickly turned into a small human figure. His entire body was only about a foot long, but he had hands, feet, a nose, and eyes. Shockingly, he was a Jean Moubai that had been shrunk by a dozen times. Spiritual seed. This was a special situation that would only appear when one's cultivation had reached the level of the Holy Emperor. Once the Holy Emperor died, he would form a spiritual seed. This spiritual seed was different from the nascent soul in the cultivation world. The so-called spiritual seed was an existence that had form but no substance. If the spiritual seed was lucky enough to escape, then it could find a family to reincarnate. It looked forward to making a comeback, and it could even retain the memories of its previous life. Most importantly, this kind of spiritual seed could not be destroyed with Xian Qi. Only the Holy Emperor who died under the Netherworld's death Qi could not produce a spiritual seed. For example, those who died under the hands of the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, the small figure swayed in the wind, and a look of panic appeared on his face. He quickly fell from the air, trying to escape. Jun Mo Xie exclaimed in surprise. To think that there's such an interesting thing. He casually waved his palm, intending to kill it, but he did not expect that it would only blow the little spiritual seed a little further away, and did not cause any damage. The tiny figure glanced at Jun Mo Xie. His eyes filled with bone-piercing venomous hatred and undisguised contempt. Xiao Ying rushed out and quickly welcomed him. Her intention was to bring the spiritual seed back, and then use a secret technique to take good care of it until she found a suitable family to let the spiritual seed reincarnate on its own. Then, the Holy Land would send someone to protect this family, and when the baby was born, he would be brought back to the Holy Land and carefully nurtured. After all, this kind of accidental death of the Holy Emperor's spiritual seed was very rare. If it was the Holy Emperor who had died of old age, this kind of spiritual seed would definitely not appear. Once such a person grew up, because he retained all the experiences and realms of his previous life, he would naturally be blessed by nature, and his growth speed would undoubtedly be unusually shocking. In just a few days, he would become an all-powerful peerless expert. In fact, his achievements would be even greater than in his previous life. Seeing Xiao Ying's arrival, a trace of sincere joy appeared on the little figure's face. He felt that he had a backer to back him up, and he actually made a strange hand gesture at Jun Mo Xie. His illusory face was filled with hatred. Jun Mo Xie let out a strange laugh. How could he not recognize this gesture? It was a gesture that meant just you wait. Obviously, Jean Moubai wanted Jun Moxie to wait for him, and he would definitely come back to take revenge. Jun Moxie laughed and said mockingly, "Do you think you still have the chance? What a fool's dream." He flipped his right hand, and suddenly a cluster of black flames appeared on the tip of his finger. With a flick of his finger, the flames flew out with a swoosh. Before it could get close to the small figure was already imprisoned by a strange mysterious force, and automatically moved towards the black flames. At this time, Xiao Ying was less than 50 feet away from them. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, the black flames moved as fast as lightning and came into contact with the body of the little man. The little man who had almost ignored Jun Mo Xie's powerful palm strike earlier had a look of extreme pain on his illusory face. The black flames had already started to burn from his 2 legs. It was neither fast nor slow and graceful. As it burned, it descended quietly. All the elites present, including the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, took a step back at the same time, their faces filled with genuine shock. That small cluster of black flames contained a sense of danger that even the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters felt a chill down their spines. What kind of flame was that? It could even cause damage to the almost indestructible spiritual seed. This matter had obviously exceeded everyone's understanding. Xiao Ying suddenly stopped and shouted angrily, "Jun Moxie? What do you mean by this? Zhang Mubai is already dead. You still refuse to let him go, and even want to destroy the spiritual seed he left behind?" Jun Moxie said lightly, "Is Holy Emperor Zhang really dead?" "Not necessarily. Didn't you see that child gesturing for me to wait for him? I don't have the patience to wait for him for 1,000 years. I might as well just finish him off in one go, it'll save me a lot of trouble." Xiao Ying was so angry that she couldn't speak. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, and her face turned red. She gritted her teeth and said, "Jun Moxie, your methods are too vicious. You won't even let go of a spiritual seed. You. What's the difference between this and killing a baby with your own hands? You are simply inhumane." "Baby? Do you think that's an ordinary baby? Don't you know that when this baby, who clearly remembers everything that happened today, grows up in the future, if he hides in the dark, how many people of my Jun family will die in his hands?" Jun Moxie smiled mockingly, and deliberately emphasized the word baby. Then, he said in a calm and unruffled manner, "His life is more precious compared to the lives of many people in my family. If it were you, how would you choose? Not to mention that in my eyes, he is not even comparable to a dog of my Jun family." He smiled at Xiao Ying and said, "Beauty, those who are my enemies, even if they die, I can pull them out and kill them again. Didn't I say it openly just now? Do you believe me now?" It was so infuriating that Xiao Ying's whole body began to tremble. The black flame in the air burned very quickly. In just a short moment, before it fell to the ground, the little spiritual seed had already been completely burned. Not even a speck of dust or ashes was left. Zhang Mubai, a generation's holy emperor, with hundreds of years of cultivation, was destroyed just like that, forever disappearing from this world. The black flame fell to the ground, but it did not extinguish, continuing to burn slowly but elegantly. Although it was only a small amount, it seemed as if it could burn to the ends of the world. The soil that it touched also began to burn slowly. Jun Moxie's hand trembled, and that terrifying black flame instantly returned to his fingertips. With another flip, it disappeared. A series of panting sounds rang out from the opposite side. The remaining 10 or so people from the 3 Holy Lands had bloodshot eyes, their faces full of hatred. Suddenly, they roared in unison and rushed over. "Kill this demon! This brat is insane and inhumane! Kill him! Kill him! Take revenge for Holy Emperor Zhang! Take revenge for our brothers!" Chu Wu Hui shouted, "All of you, stop!" Chu Wu Hui's voice reverberated through the surroundings. But right now, everyone had already descended into a frenzy, and no one listened to his orders. Jun Moxie's face suddenly turned as cold as ice. With a cold chuckle, he said, "Revenge? Come at me together. This young master does not mind at all. Welcome, a big welcome." With a flip of his palm, he roared, "Fall for this daddy." With a loud rumble, a huge pit suddenly appeared within a radius of 60 zhang. Or rather, it should be said that it was a bottomless pit. The experts who had just started, including the 2 holy emperors, were all caught off guard and fell into the pit. Jun Moxie laughed maniacally, an extremely cruel expression on his face. With a wave of his right hand, that abnormally terrifying black flame appeared once again. Just now, it was only a small portion of the spirit seed. But now, a black flame that covered an area of almost 20 zhang had appeared. Jun Moxie's eyes narrowed and he shouted coldly, "Go!" The black flame flew out with a swoosh, and with a loud bang, it exploded into tiny black flames. Small wisps of black flames covered the entire sky above the pit, slowly descending. It was as if the heavens had a wide net, not letting anyone through. "Stop! Quickly stop!" Cheng Yin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui roared at the same time and flew over. But Jun Moxie was like the experts of the 3 Holy Lands, completely ignoring them. Ever since he had personally said, "Start the battle with the living, and end it with the dead," he had never thought of letting these people off. Now that there was such a heaven-sent opportunity, how could he be willing to stop? If their positions were switched, and the ones being slaughtered were themselves, would Jean Moubai and the rest stop if someone shouted for them to stop? The answer was obvious to everyone. That would be an extremely laughable matter. Being soft-hearted to one's enemies was the greatest cruelty to oneself and one's family. Jun Moxie felt that he would never do such a brainless thing that would cause pain to his loved ones and delight to his enemies. Miserable screams rang out one after another. Those were screams that pierced through one's soul. If one did not hear it with their own ears, no one would be able to imagine what kind of torture these people in the pit were enduring right now. Such a small pit, even though it seemed to be bottomless, how deep could it really be? Could it really trap a saint and the Holy Emperor? But after waiting for a long time, not a single person was able to come up. The experts in the pit were truly unlucky. The reason why they had charged up and ignored Chu Wu Hui's orders was because they were enraged by the destruction of Jean Moubai's body and soul. Secondly, they had seen the power of the black flames burning Jean Moubai's spirit seed. There was a trace of fear in their hearts. If someone like Jun Moxie was allowed to live, no one would be able to feel at ease. To be able to destroy even a spirit seed, this kind of person was simply too terrifying. This was equivalent to destroying their future after death. This kind of person definitely could not be allowed to live. So they all chose to take action at the same time. They had to get rid of this future trouble. Right now, Jun Moxie had just finished a huge battle, and his Xian Qi had already been depleted by more than half. Right now, he was extremely close to the Three Holy Lands camp, but far from his own team. This was truly a heaven-sent opportunity. Everyone charged forward together. All of them were high-level saints, and there were even 2 experts from the Holy Emperor. Such a formation would definitely be able to kill Jun Moxie the moment they came into contact. So they all charged forward like a swarm of bees. But they had never imagined that Jun Moxie's strength had already reached such a terrifying level. With just a lift of his hand, a huge pit appeared in the ground. And the amount of black flames he could control was not just that little bit. He could actually create so much. Ever since the black flames sealed the sky, all the experts had been striking out with their palms, trying to extinguish these floating flames. Even if they could knock them away, it would be good. But what they did not expect was, no matter how much strength they used, it had no effect on these black flames at all. They could only watch as they slowly and elegantly descended. As they descended, the space between the flames became smaller and smaller. Originally, not even a single person could get out. Now, not even half a body could get out. Finally, one of the saint experts could not hold on any longer. With a swoosh, he took off his robe and charged forward. Everyone's spirits were lifted. They stared at this person who dared to be the first to charge forward. As long as he was lucky enough to get out, then everyone else would be able to do the same. Even if he could not get out, if he could disperse the black flames, he would still be a worthy sacrifice. But their hope was like a soap bubble, bursting rapidly. The moment that Saint came into contact with the black flames, the robe he was waving was instantly pierced through by the black flames. Then, it landed on his body unhurriedly. Then, this saint, who had been stabbed by swords and knives, and who would not even let out a groan after using all the tortures in the world, immediately screamed in agony. He rolled around on the ground, screaming in agony. His body twitched and twisted, but no matter how he rolled, the black flames on his body remained the same, and continued to burn unhurriedly. As he rolled, the black flames on his body also accidentally touched the bodies of others. Then, those who were not lucky suddenly screamed in agony, rolling on the ground. The black flames were like a plague, burning on their bodies. As they rolled, it caused even more people to be touched by the black flames. That trend was like a rolling snowball, getting bigger and bigger as it rolled, and the area affected also became bigger and bigger, and in the air, there were still countless black flames, like black snowflakes, slowly and elegantly falling down. Hai Wuya and Hiji Qiu, who were lucky enough not to be touched by the black flames, looked at each other, and saw the fear in each other's eyes. Suddenly, Hiji Qiu had a flash of inspiration. He shouted, dig a hole, and get out from the other side." Hai Wuya immediately came to his senses. The two holy emperors had joined forces to attack, and at this moment, who knew how much of their Jinqi had been used? With a loud bang, they immediately dug a hole that was more than 10 zhang long in front of them. The two of them did not even try to be modest, and with a bend of their waists, they fought to be the first to enter the hole behind him. Another 2 4th-level saints followed. As for the others, their bodies were all covered in black flames, and they were all screaming and wailing in pain. A saint whose body was on fire screamed madly, suddenly discovering this hole. His face was already half burnt, but he still rushed towards the hole with all his might, only to be sent flying by Hiji Qiu's palm fiercely. The ground rumbled, and dust flew everywhere. Hiji Qiu, Hai Wuya, and the other 2 saints jumped out, their faces covered in dust, their eyes lifeless. 9 serenities and 14 masters and the rest had already gathered at the edge of the hole to watch, and clearly saw the scene of the saint whose body was on fire being slapped away by Hiji Qiu. At this moment, they turned their heads to look at the 4 people, their expressions all filled with disdain. No matter what the reason was, those who attacked their comrades in times of danger would always be the target of everyone's disdain. The scene in the hole at this moment caused everyone to shiver in fear. One by one, the experts with powerful Xian cultivation were all inside, and most of them only had half of their bodies left. But they were still wriggling, screaming, and burning. Qiao Ying's face was deathly pale, and she suddenly stomped her feet as if she had gone mad. Large amounts of soil poured into the hole like a mountain torrent. She could not bear to see everything in front of her, and decided to bury these people to prevent them from suffering, so that they could just die. But something even more bizarre happened. The soil and rocks that were slanting downwards instantly filled up the entire cave. However, it was only for a short moment before it slowly sank downwards. It didn't take long before it disappeared without a trace. Countless black flames once again appeared in the cave, slowly and elegantly burning this time. The soil was actually burned completely in an instant. There was no longer anyone screaming inside, and all the bodies were only left with pieces. It looked like they were about to finish burning. The 4 people turned at the same time, and looked at Jun Moxie with shock, fear, and disbelief. Jun Moxie stood there calmly, smiling faintly, his white robe fluttering, handsome and tall, like a jade tree in the wind. What a good young master, a handsome young man. But now, the 4 experts looked at him as if they were looking at a demon. Even the world's #1 madman, 9 serenities and 14 masters, was no exception. This guy, was he a human or a demon? Jun Moxie smiled faintly, and suddenly stretched out his hand, pointing at the 4 survivors, and said softly, "The 3 Holy Lands, you better not provoke me anymore. My patience is really limited. You can't bear the consequences." He smiled gently, shook his head and sighed softly. He bemoaned the state of the universe and pitied the fate of mankind. "Haha, I didn't want to kill the last few people, but I'm a person who is afraid of trouble. If I stop and don't kill, would you all think that I'm very soft-hearted? Would something like this happen again in the future? In order to avoid trouble, I can only prove it to you all. Don't ever think that I, Jun Moxie, am easy to bully. In fact, killing you all is like slaughtering chickens and dogs." Complete silence. Now, no one doubted Jun Moxie's words anymore, especially the 4 people who had just come out of the hole. There was only fear in their eyes when they looked at Jun Moxie. That hellish scene, even if they died, they did not want to experience it a second time. It was really too scary. Their courage was broken, and their hearts were cold. Even the three guardians looked at June Moxie with some indescribable feelings. Good. Good, June Moxie. You are really arrogant. Clapping sounds rang out. 9 serenities and 14 masters slowly clapped, looking at June Moxie with smiling eyes, and said cautiously, I have to say, although you are still young, you are already qualified to be our opponent. With this kind of magical flame of yours, if we are careless and get tricked by you, I am afraid even this young master will not be able to escape. In the hands of 9 serenities and 14 masters, there was a sword that belonged to an unknown person. On the tip of the sword, there was a black flame dancing, and the body of the sword was slowly burning. It did not melt, but only burned bit by bit, and the places that were burned turned into nothingness. This chapter took up an entire night. More than 10 hours, plus a day of revision. I feel that I have written it very smoothly. 3 chapters, 9,000 words. If brothers and sisters think that this is a breakthrough, please cast a monthly vote. If brothers and sisters think that this is a breakthrough, please cast a monthly vote. Thank you. The continuous single chapters have no effect. I am very disappointed. Perhaps what I have written can no longer arouse your passion and blood. I am sorry, please don't scold me, but I have really tried my best. Starting from tomorrow, I will enter the Misty Mansion and start a new plot. I really hope that brothers and sisters can give me the motivation. I really need the monthly votes in your hands. This is true. Asking for monthly votes, for this chapter, and for the real rise of the evil prince. Chapter 893. With a flick of his hand, the 9 nether 14th young master stabbed the sword into the ground. The black flames sank into the soil, but it immediately burned through the soil, continuing to burn upwards. It really can burn anything. The 9 serenities and 14 masters sighed. This young master is truly shocked. June Moxie chuckled and said modestly, This is just a small trick. I've let everyone see a joke. I'm ashamed. Everyone's mouths twitched. This kind of unimaginable skill, and you still say it's a small trick? Then wouldn't your great skill be able to burn the heavens and destroy the world? If June Moxie had enough spirit energy to support it, even if he used the flame of primal chaos to burn the heavens, or even the entire world, that was not something impossible or strange. Young Master June's self-proclaimed title of Evil Monarch is truly worthy of the word evil. His methods are truly evil, vicious, and sinister. But Ching Yin Xiao looked at June Moxie coldly and said, For today's matter, you have to give the 3 of us an explanation for massacring the people of our holy lands. Explanation? What explanation? What kind of explanation do I have to give you? June Moxie smiled strangely. You 4 experts came here to act as arbitrators, but did this young master beg you to do so? You are seniors and experts, and if you want to be the arbiter, this young master will turn a blind eye to it out of respect for the elderly. However, this arbiter should at least have a fair and just attitude, right? I wonder if I'm wrong about this? Of course, arbitrators should naturally do what arbitrators should do. Fairness and justice is what we have always pursued as arbitrators. The 9 serenities and 14 masters said in a sanctimonious manner, although his eerie voice did not match the word sanctimonious at all. Since Senior 14th Young Master has said so, this young master will say it directly. Just now, Senior Cheng wanted an explanation from me? I don't know what kind of explanation I should give. Instead, I want to ask Senior Cheng, or perhaps all the seniors of Heaven's Saint Palace. June Moxie said with grief and indignation, Just now, under the watchful eyes of the 4 arbitrators, a group of people besieged me. Moreover, it was after the arbiter announced the end of the duel. This fact made me speechless. Did the words of the arbiter still have any power? If it was the 14th young master who announced the results just now, then it would be fine. But I remember that it was you who announced the results, Senior Chu, right? What role did you arbiters play? Qing Yin Xiao and the other two were momentarily speechless. The truth was right in front of their eyes, and with their status, they were not willing to speak against their conscience. You're spouting nonsense. Surprisingly, it was 9 serenities and 14 masters who spoke up to help resolve the situation. He said sternly, "Why didn't he take up the responsibility of arbitration? Didn't he speak out to stop them just now?" As he said this, he chuckled in schadenfreude. When Qing Yin Xiao and the other two heard 9 serenities and 14 masters speak up for them, they thought that this madman had become a good person today. If he spoke up for them, it would be much better than them trying to quibble. But when they listened carefully, was he really helping them resolve the situation? This was simply adding oil to the fire, beating a dog when it was down. Just now, it was this junior's slip of the tongue. Senior 14th young master's words are reasonable. When they charged over, this junior clearly heard the voices of the 2 seniors to stop them, and it wasn't just one shout. Jun Moxie apologized, and then with an expression that was even more wrong than Do-E's, he said in a sonorous voice, "But this junior doesn't understand. Even if we don't talk about the 3 seniors' status as arbitrators, just the status of the 3 guardians in the Holy Lands isn't enough to deter them at all? Looking at the current situation, the 3 guardians' orders are actually like a fart to the people of the Holy Lands, and they don't care at all. I'm really shocked. Oh, this junior was too agitated just now, and had no intention of profaning the 3 of you. I hope you can understand." The 3 of them instantly turned red. The 3 of them and the 14 people were the arbitrators, but the battle had ended. One party had ganged up on the other party, and the other party was alone. This kind of bad luck couldn't be justified no matter where it was. Especially when the 3 of them were the most respected people in the 3 Holy Lands, and the people below them didn't care about them at all. It was really a great loss of face for them. This slap from Jun Moxie caused the 3 of them to feel a piercing pain in their hearts. Their faces turned red, but they could only endure it. The 3 of them couldn't help but glare fiercely at the 2 lucky survivors, Hai Wu Ye and He Ji Qiu, their gazes extremely unfriendly. 9 serenities and 14 masters, Lengling said. These words are not nonsense. Speaking of an explanation, this young master also wants an explanation. This young master is also one of the arbitrators. Just like what that June brat said, this kind of vile thing actually happened right under this young master's eyes. Whether or not those juniors treat your words as fart, this young master doesn't care. But this kind of action is clearly not putting this young master in their eyes at all. This matter, to this young master, can be said to have seriously damaged this young master's reputation. This matter definitely cannot be left unsettled like this. Even if that June brat doesn't pursue this matter, this young master will still pursue this matter. The 3 of them had a bitter expression on their faces. Just now, they were only thinking about that brat Jun Moxie. How could they have forgotten about this matter? What should they do now? This lunatic can't be judged with common sense. Especially this time, they weren't in the right. This is troublesome, Jun Moxie continued. That's right, that's right. Even if we don't talk about 14th young master's face and reputation, there's still the problem of this young master's safety. The 3 guardians wanted an explanation from me, and this young master expressed his understanding. After all, so many people had died. But, at that time, they had already pounced on me. If this young master didn't retaliate, I'm afraid they would have torn me to pieces in an instant. Could it be that, in your hearts, I should just wait for death to come? The 2 of them echoed each other like this, pressing forward step by step, causing the faces of the 3 guardians to turn the color of pig liver. Jun Moxie pursed his lips. Or perhaps, in the minds of the 3 guardians, only the Holy Lands are allowed to win or lose, but I'm not allowed to retaliate at all? Your sneak attack and encirclement caused the deaths of many people, and you still want to seek justice from those who narrowly escaped death? Isn't this a bit too much of a joke? Guardians, could it be that your Heaven Saint Palace is such a sore loser? 3 seniors, think about it, isn't this logical? As he said this, June Moxie spread his hands. Numerous black flames suddenly jumped up from the ground, slowly merging into a ball and returning to June Moxie's palms. With a flip of his palms, they disappeared. The words sore loser had just come out of Chu Wu Hui's mouth to criticize He Jiqiu. Right now, June Moxie's words were being used on the 3 of them. You brat, bullshit. How are we sore losers? Qing Yin Xiao roared angrily. The 3 guardians were extremely furious, but they had no way to refute, because they were the ones in the wrong, and the encirclement had just ended. If it wasn't sore losers, then what else could it be? Feeling extremely stifled, Chu Wu Hui turned to Hai Wu Ye and the others and hollered, "Despicable things, what are you waiting for? Scram? Even if you want to scram, you have to give this young master an explanation first." 9 serenities and 14 masters, Lengling snorted coldly. "Before I say anything, I want to see which one of you dares to scram." Qing Yin Xiao forcefully suppressed his anger. After taking 2 deep breaths, he said with great difficulty, "This matter is our side's fault. I hope 14th brother can forgive us. A great person is magnanimous and let this matter go. Don't make things difficult for these juniors anymore." His entire group was slaughtered cleanly, and he couldn't even ask for an explanation. Instead, he was forced to apologize to someone else. The humiliation and grievance in Qing Yin Zhao's heart could be imagined. If it really was June Moxie's fault, then Qing Yin Xiao and the other 2 would rather fight to the death with the 9 serenities and 14 masters. They would definitely not let June Moxie off. But the cause of this matter was truly caused by the Holy Lands. Their methods were indeed a little despicable. A large group of people ganging up on a child, who wasn't even 20 years old, this was indeed a little unpleasant to hear. Who would have thought that not only did the 4 of them lose face, the majority of their people had also died, and the initiative had even been handed over to the enemy. What was this called? Even if you guys don't want face, we still do. F***ck. Where do we still have face now? We can't even get it back anymore. Qing Yin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui gritted their teeth and swore in their hearts. When we return to the Holy Lands, we definitely won't let a single one of these fellows off. We definitely have to teach them a good lesson. Oh? Since Brother Qing has personally apologized, this young master has always been magnanimous. Since that's the case, I'll let it go this time. 9 serenities and 14 masters said magnanimously. You guys can scram now. Slightly further away, Hai Wu Ye and He Jiqiu's eyes were practically spitting fire. But under the stern gazes of Chu Wu Hui and Qing Yin Xiao, they did not say a single word and turned to leave. Not long later, their figures had already disappeared. Only Qiao Ying did not participate in the argument. She only stared blankly at the empty space. A total of 30 top-notch experts. They had paid such a huge price and lost so much face to protect these people. But in the blink of an eye, all of them had died here. These people were all the battle strength of the war for seizing the heavens. So many had suddenly died. The impact on the war for seizing the heavens was definitely significant, enough to affect the overall situation. If there were no reinforcements, with the current strength of the Holy Lands, they would definitely lose this war for seizing the heavens. This matter ends here. Chu Wu Hui said decisively. June Moxie, you won the exquisite lotus. Are you going to follow us to get it? Or are you going to wait for us to send someone to send it to the Tian Fa forest? Chapter 894. Wait for them to send it to the Tian Fa forest? There were too many variables. With just a random reason, they would be able to deny the exquisite lotus. Right now, June Moxie did not dare to believe the noble character of the Holy Lands at all. Why would they wait for them to send it over? Even if they did not play any tricks, if it dragged on for 3 to 5 years, it would be enough to make people anxious. As for going to the Heaven Saint Palace to retrieve it, this choice was equally difficult. Right now, it was nice to say that you won the battle and would naturally be able to obtain the bet. But if he went to the Heaven Saint Palace, so what if these fellows turned their backs on him? Who knew how many undying old fools were waiting for him in that mysterious place? What kind of strange tricks would they have up their sleeves? This was not the first time the three Holy Lands turned their backs on someone. June Moxie had never dared to trust the credibility of these people. Although June Moxie was conceited, he was not arrogant to the point of thinking that he could go against the entire Heaven Saint Palace with his own strength. It was the same even after his strength had increased. Since we've already won, could it be that we don't want the bet? The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters said sinisterly. June brat, you don't need to hesitate so much. This young master is the judge of this battle. I will naturally accompany you to the Heaven Saint Palace to retrieve the exquisite lotus and end this bet. This young master wants to see if they dare to refuse. He had been watching coldly from the side. Although Chu Wu Hui's words seemed to be fair on the surface, there was actually a hidden meaning behind it. In his heart, he was somewhat angered. Furthermore, June Moxie was the descendant of an old friend. Thus, he had stepped forward and interfered. With his current position, it was completely justifiable for him to interfere. June Moxie was extremely touched. This junior appreciates senior 14th young master's kind intentions. But, with your identity, if you go to the Heaven Saint Palace, I'm afraid it will still be a little awkward. The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters had always been the greatest enemy of the Heaven Saint Palace. If he went, wouldn't it be awkward? Even if the Heaven Saint Palace were to use all of their strength, they would still want to keep this madman here forever. June Moxie had never been one to owe anyone favors. How could he allow the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters to take such a risk for him? Fine, you decide for yourself. If this young master goes, it will indeed be somewhat inconvenient. The 9 Nether 14th young master understood his meaning and did not insist. However, according to my personal experience, with the reputation of the Heaven Saint Palace, they might not go back on their word and renege on the bet of a child like you. June Moxie nodded with a smile and said to Chu Wu Hui, since Senior 14th young master has said so, I will follow you to Heaven Saint Palace. Chu Wu Hui raised his thumb and said, Good! How courageous! Good man! June Moxie chuckled in his heart. I only have absolute confidence that I can escape unscathed. It's not that I have the guts to do that, and I definitely won't use my life to bet on you keeping your promise. Returning to the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer team, he said to Mei Shuiyan, I'm going to retrieve the exquisite lotus, and then I have some other things to do. You've left Tian Fa for long enough. You should go back to take a look. I'll leave you to lead the way back. And then you must be careful. Mei Shuiyan looked at him with concern. Don't worry, don't you know me? As long as I want to escape, who can catch me? June Moxie said in a low voice, winking at her. Mei Shuiyan thought of that mysterious pagoda of his and couldn't help but relax. She nodded with a smile. When you go back this time, you must make good use of the time to increase the strength of your family. As for the 2 pieces of spirit vein I gave you, just use the method I used earlier to scrape off a pinch of powder and drink it with water. Although that is not the golden jade fluid, it is still the essence of the spirit stone immortal milk. Remember not to take too much of it. If you take too much, it will be very dangerous. June Moxie said. Understood, I will take note. Also, after you go back, quickly raise the strength of grandfather and third uncle. You must be ahead of everyone else in this aspect. You must ensure that grandfather and third uncle are the strongest people in the June family apart from you and me. As for the pills, you can distribute them as you see fit. I understand. Mei Shuiyan nodded her head seriously. She understood June Moxie's actions very well. Jun Tian and Jun Wui's current strength was undoubtedly very strong in the secular world. But in Tian Fa they were the weakest, and they were the most important people in the Jun family. If they maintained this situation for a long time, even with Jun Moxie suppressing them, it would not be a long-term solution. So, the most important thing right now was to raise the strength of Jun Tian and Jun Wui. Even if they did not have enough strength, this increase would certainly increase their lifespan by a considerable amount. To be honest, I really miss Xiao Yi, Qing Han, and Mother. Mei Shuyan's face turned red as she said in a low voice. Don't worry, in terms of prestige, you are higher than me in our Jun family. When you go back this time, they will definitely pester you to the point of annoyance. Let's see if you still miss them then. Jun Moxie revealed a strange smile. These words were not baseless, they were the truth. Ever since Mei Shuyan had sacrificed herself to save them, everyone in the Jun family had wholeheartedly accepted this future young mistress. Mei Shuyan's popularity in the Jun family had definitely reached a terrifying level, where everyone was united as one. After the arrangements were made, Jun Moxie was about to turn around when he saw Bailey Luo Yun slowly walking over. Bailey Luo Yun opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something. Looking at the shy expression on this great assassin's face, Jun Moxie asked, Luo Yun, what's the matter? It's like this, young master, this time, I want to stay in Chrysanthemum City for a few more days to deal with private matters, so I'm asking young master. Bailey Luo Yun stuttered. This brat saw his old lover, he's moved. On the side, Lung Ao laughed strangely. Bailey Luo Yun's face instantly turned red. Wow. Really? Jun Moxie exclaimed in surprise, then suddenly hooked his arm around Bailey Luo Yun's neck, acting like a good brother, and began to gossip. This is a good thing. What's the specific situation? What's her name? What does she look like? Is she fat or thin? Is she tall or short? Which family is she from? How much does she weigh? What's her 3 measurements? Do you have any nude photos, Bailey Luo Yun was instantly battered and exhausted. He begged for mercy. Young master, please spare me. Her name is Zhan Meng Dai. Someone from the Zhan family? Jun Moxie frowned slightly. He suddenly remembered that when he changed his name to Dongfang Dashu, he seemed to have met this girl once. She was a very beautiful and outstanding beauty. However, he had just killed the Zhan family's old ancestor, and Bailey Luo Yun actually had a partner from the Zhan family. Although he didn't mind, the other party. Please rest assured, young master, I know what to do. Bailey Luo Yun's originally awkward handsome face showed a trace of pain. I will tell her the truth clearly. If she chooses her family and becomes enemies with young master, I will not force her, and we will become strangers. But if she chooses me, beads of sweat dripped down Bailey Luo Yun's face. He used a lot of strength and said in a low voice, if she chooses me in the end, please, young master, grant her wish. Don't worry. 100 years of cultivation will cross the same boat, 1,000 years of cultivation will sleep together. If she is your wife, she will definitely be your wife. Although Zhan Mubai is the Zhan family's old ancestor, he is someone from hundreds of years ago. Zhan Meng Dai might not have any feelings for him, right? Jun Moxie patted Bailey Luo Yun's shoulder and encouraged him. Luo Yun, where there's a will, there's a way. Go and fight for it. Things might not be as serious as you think. Wives were meant to be snatched. Who cares if she is willing or not? Let's cook the rice for her first. Let's see where she can run to with that belly of hers. Hee, if it wasn't for the fact that I can't beat her and can't bear to use force, I might have already. Suddenly, he felt a pain in his ear. It was Mei Shuyan who had pinched his ear with a jade hand. She leaned in with a red face and asked in a dangerous voice, You what? What do you mean you can't beat her and have to use force? Jun Moxie begged for mercy and said with a grimace, What I mean is, I've already. His eyes rolled a few times, and he suddenly had an idea. I've already liked you for a long time, but you're so powerful, so I didn't dare to confess, afraid that you would hit me. Aren't you very touched? He. He laughed dryly. Everyone burst into laughter. And Bailey Luoyun felt much better in his heart as he laughed. Luoyun, you go. We all support you. Don't be overcautious. You have to grasp your own happiness. Mei Shuyan said gently. Thank you. Young madam, Bailey Luoyun said gratefully. This young madam caused Mei Shuyan's face to turn red, and Jun Emosie's heart to burst with joy. Why don't you bring a few more people along? Let Lung Ao accompany you, then choose a small team of Heaven Destroyer members. Jun Moxie said domineeringly, whoever dares to snatch your wife, just beat them to death or cripple them. Everyone was sweating profusely. This young master was the classic posture of a bandit who wanted to snatch the bride. The legendary number 1 hedonistic young master actually lived up to his name. After settling these matters, everyone discussed some other matters. Finally, everything was settled. Jun Moxie watched as Mei Shuyan brought her people and left like a dark cloud. On the other side, Bailey Luoyun also brought a few people and headed in the opposite direction, entering the city. The battlefield that was filled with blood and fire just a moment ago was now completely silent and empty. Jun Moxie turned around and saw 9 serenities and 14 masters standing there with his hands behind his back. Qiao Ying and Qing Yin Xiao were watching from the side, while Chu Wu Hui was squatting on the ground with a sullen look on his face. He was using his sword to dig the soil, as if he was looking for something. What are you doing? Jun Mo-sia asked in astonishment as he looked at the 20 or 30 earthworms that had been dug out. They were still squirming. Hearing his question, Chu Wu Hui's face turned red, but he did not say a word. He gritted his teeth and continued to dig. His face was filled with an expression that seemed like he wanted to cry but had no tears. Even if his shoal was raped by 100 Xian beasts, it should not make this guardian have such an expression. Jun Moxie's heart was filled with bewilderment. I apologize. I forgot about one thing. Yesterday, I said I would go to the Misty Mansion today. It seems like I can't do it, because there's still a bet. I still have to get the exquisite lotus today. I've written more than 7,000 words, so I won't be posting all of them. Let me save some. What if I'm drunk by some unscrupulous deity, and can't write anymore? Brothers, don't you think so? This brother's alcohol tolerance seems to be very dangerous. Yesterday, that fellow asked me when I was going so that he could wait for me. I asked, what are you waiting for me for? Are you waiting for me to make you wish you were dead? In the end, that perverted fellow jumped 3 feet high and said in surprise, you really want to rape my shoal? Then I have to prepare to wash myself properly. Chapter 895. Your battle has come to an end, but our bet has yet to be completed. It's a bet we made in the 5-man battle formation just now. The loser has to dig out 1,000 earthworms without using Xian Qi. He lost the bet, that's how it is, and he's fulfilling the bet now. 9 serenities and 14 masters explained patiently. The bet is to dig earthworms. Although it's a little awkward to dig earthworms without using Xian Qi, but the soil here is very fertile, and with the huge commotion just now, all the earthworms must have been alarmed. I believe that even digging out 1,000 earthworms is not a difficult task. Why is he so worried? If Qiao Ying is a woman, it's understandable that she's afraid and disgusted, but why is a man like Chu Wu Hui so worried? Jun Moxie found it funny but was also puzzled. This is something you don't know again. In the 3rd round of the 7-man battle formation, we made another bet. Whoever lost the bet would have to eat these 1,000 earthworms. Unfortunately, he lost the bet again. He originally had a chance to win, and I generously gave him the first choice. 9 serenities and 14 masters used a proud tone to explain his results. June Moxie laughed loudly. Then, Senior Chu is really too unlucky. Serves you right. Who asked you to have no confidence in me? You bet on my enemy. It would be strange if you didn't lose. Chu Wu Hui groaned in ecstasy and rolled his eyes. He did not say anything and continued to dig the earth, sweating profusely. Earthworms. I want the black earthworms, not the red ones. Yes, the most disgusting kind. 9 serenities and 14 masters was at the side, supervising strictly and meticulously. On the ground, more and more earthworms appeared. A large group of them were entangled together, occasionally sticking out their heads and tails, wriggling slowly. June Moxie suddenly remembered that these things were going to be swallowed by Chu Wu Hui later. He could not help but retch. His face instantly turned pale. That scene was too terrifying. It seemed that the soil here was very fertile. Despite the many requests of the 9 serenities and 14 masters, they managed to dig up 1,000 black, disgusting worms in just one night. After finishing his work, Chu Wu Hui's face was ashen. Covered in mud, he crawled out of the pit, a look of despair on his face. With his last shred of hope, he begged, "Brother 14th." A fawning smile appeared on Chu Wu Hui's face. Standing in front of the 9 serenities and 14 masters, he looked extremely pitiful. There was not a single trace of the aura of a peak expert in the world. "What?" 9 serenities and 14 masters asked arrogantly with her nose in the air. "Brother 14th, look, I dug up 1,000 earthworms. I'm not trying to act shamelessly," a fawning voice said. "If you don't want to go back on your word, then hurry up and eat. Close your eyes, stop breathing through your nose, and it'll be over soon," someone said in a gloomy voice. I don't have a good appetite recently, Can I not eat?" He smiled fawningly. "No. If you're willing to bet, then you have to be willing to admit your loss. You! Don't go too far." Chu Wu Hui was enraged. "How am I going too far?" As expected of a peerless expert from the Holy Lands, to be able to say such things. "If you say I'm going too far, then I'm going too far. What about it? You lost the bet, are you trying to act shamelessly?" 9 serenities and 14 masters snorted. "I'm not trying to act shamelessly. Didn't I dig up 1,000 earthworms? They were all black earthworms according to your instructions," Chu Wu Hui said with a red face and neck. But then, he lowered his voice and grabbed 9 serenities and 14 masters' arm and shook it. "Brother 14th." His voice was soft and gentle, like a girl whining to her lover. At the side, June Moxie actually shivered. Even June Dashao's calm and collected self seemed to be unable to withstand it. On the other side, Qiao Ying and Qing Yin Zhao's hair also stood on end. Even with their 1,000 years of cultivation, they were unable to resist. "Even if you call me 14th master, it's useless. If you're willing to bet, you have to accept your loss. Even if the heavens break, you still have to eat it. Not a single one can be missing." Although Chu Wu Hui's intentions were soft and gentle, 9 serenities and 14 masters' heart was like steel, unwavering. You're trying to kill me, ah!" Chu Wu Hui stomped his feet and roared. His voice was filled with tears, and his body was trembling uncontrollably. "Cry. Why don't you cry? Why don't you cry, ah? If you really cry, I'll let you off. Why aren't you crying yet?" 9 serenities and 14 masters said calmly. He had predicted that a peerless expert like Chu Wu Hui would definitely care about his own status. Especially now that there were other people beside him, and there were even juniors present, he definitely wouldn't lower himself to cry out loud. Besides, eating earthworms is not a big deal. This young noble had eaten them before when he was sealed. Although it wasn't delicious, it wasn't poisonous either. If I hadn't experienced it, would this young noble have made this bet? Everything had a drop in the 10,000, but he had definitely underestimated the threat of eating earthworms to ordinary people. Before 9 serenities and 14 masters finished speaking, Chu Wu Hui suddenly sat on the ground and slapped his hands on the ground, crying loudly. Tears rolled down his cheeks, and he was truly grieving to the extreme. His voice was full of emotion. His cry was so sorrowful that it shook the heavens and the earth, and his tears flowed freely in an instant. The 9 nether 14th young master, Jun Mo Xie, Qiao Ying, and Cheng Yin Xiao all had the same expression on their faces. Their eyes were wide open and their mouths were wide open, their eyeballs almost popping out of their sockets. CK your grandpa. You're really crying, ah? 9 serenities and 14 masters looked at him angrily and cursed. This was simply too unexpected. This was the guardian of heaven, St. Palace, crying a few times can avoid eating earthworms. Why wouldn't I cry? Ask everyone here, what would they choose? Chu Wu Hui stopped crying and raised his teary eyes to look at 9 serenities and 14 masters. Tell me, how else do you want me to cry? Should I cry standing up or sitting down? Should I cry lying on my stomach or facing the sky? Should I cry running or jumping around? Even if I have to twist my butt and dance while crying, this old man will throw caution to the wind and fight you, as long as I don't eat earthworms. The faces of ordinary people are all made up of a layer of skin on one side, but the experts of the Holy Lands are not limited by this. They all put one layer of skin on the other side, making one side look like a two-faced person, while the other side is shameless. How can we compare to such talent? I originally thought that only people like Zhang Mubai and Hai Wu Yu were like this, but it turns out that Senior is the true outstanding talent. This Junior is in awe. Jun Moxie bowed deeply and said with a look of admiration on his face. He really had no choice but to be in awe. This kind of skin was too domineering, and this kind of skin was too amazing. Forget it, to actually be serious with someone like you. This young master has been too arrogant. If I continue to interact with a shameless person like you, it will only damage this young master's reputation. 9 serenities and 14 masters let out a long sigh and shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Suddenly, his body floated up and disappeared without a trace with a xiao sound. Only a few words floated over. June brat, don't worry and go get the exquisite lotus boldly. If anything happens to you, this young master will definitely pursue this matter to the end as the arbiter. Even if it means completely wiping out the 3 holy lands. To me, this is not a difficult matter, haha. His voice lingered in the air. As for 9 serenities and 14 masters, he had already disappeared without a trace. But this promise from 9 serenities and 14 masters was more important than anything else. With this promise, it was equivalent to giving Jun Moxie a talisman that was impervious to all evils. No matter how much the Holy Lands wanted to act shamelessly or deal with Jun Moxie, they would not dare to do so. Although Jun Moxie was 100% confident that nothing would happen to him, hearing these words still made him feel a little touched. 9 serenities and 14 masters, whether he was arrogant or crazy, but he was definitely a sentimental person. He was a friend worth befriending. The faces of the 3 guardians of the Holy Lands changed slightly. 9 serenities and 14 masters' threat was definitely not a joke. Seeing that the calamity was over, Chu Wu Hui hurriedly crawled up. 9 serenities and 14 masters had already left, so he naturally did not want to cry anymore. Glaring fiercely at Xiao Ying and Cheng Yin Xiao, he said fiercely, "What are you two laughing at? If you really have the ability, why don't you go and eat some raw earthworms?" Cheng Yin Xiao laughed loudly and said, "Eat what? We didn't make a bet." Chu Wu Hui snorted and turned to Jun Moxie. "Jun brat, you are not allowed to leak a single word of what happened today. Otherwise, I won't let you off." Jun Moxie put on a simple and honest face and said, "Senior Chu, what do you mean by today's matter? Are you talking about fighting? Or are you talking about giving an explanation? Or are you afraid that this junior will tell others about how the Holy Lands are so important that they go back on their word and gang up on me? You have to explain it clearly. If you don't explain it clearly, how would this junior know what you're talking about? You brat, you dare to feign ignorance in front of this daddy. Chu Wu Hui flew into a rage out of humiliation and rubbed his palms together with a ferocious look on his face, as if he was about to start a fight at the slightest disagreement. This junior understands now. You're referring to the matter that you're crying about. June Moxie had a look of realization on his face as he clicked his tongue and praised, I have to say, Senior Chu's crying just now was really in tune and full of emotion. His voice was full of emotion, lingering in the air for 3 days. To be able to cry to such a standard, this junior can't even be filled with admiration. How could it be that? Chu Wu Hui's face turned as red as a pig's liver, and he was speechless. On the other hand, Xiao Ying and Qing Yinxiao laughed. Let's go. Qing Yinxiao glanced at June Moxie and said, I'm sure young Master June can't wait to obtain that exquisite lotus. There's no rush, I've been very free recently, so I still have some time. Even if I have to accompany the 3 of you here and chat until next year, I'll still have time to accompany you. It's a good thing to be able to seek guidance from the 3 of you. June Moxie said with a smile. You have time, but we don't, Chu Wu Hui said exasperatedly. Suddenly, he raised his palm. At the edge of the field, that huge stone tablet, which was more than 100 feet away, suddenly disintegrated into dust without a sound. Let them be buried here quietly, don't let outsiders disturb them. Chu Wu Hui sighed. Glancing at the mess on the ground, he turned around and left. June Moxie rubbed his nose as he thought to himself. King destroyed the strange stone tablet that I've painstakingly created, and you didn't even ask me about it. How preposterous! Or is it that the fist is the bigger reason? Damn it, left with no choice, he could only follow behind Chu Wu Hui and the others. Chapter 896. The movement techniques of these 4 people were extremely fast. They traveled all the way to the southeast, and in just a few days, they had already run a few thousand miles. In these few days, the 4 of them did not speak much. Qing Yinxiao and Chu Wu Hui were more open-minded, but Xiao Ying was filled with worrying about the outcome of the war for seizing the heavens. In these few days, she had become much more haggard. Originally, with her cultivation, she should not have become like this, but the worry in her heart was difficult to dispel. The 4 of them traveled further and further away from the human world. The more they traveled, the more desolate it became. After walking for a few more days, they finally reached the peak of a tall mountain. Looking around, it was a stretch of mountains that seemed to stretch to the ends of the sky. Looking back, the mountains and rivers were like a painting, and they could faintly see the nearby towns, although they were already blurry. June Moxie, the name of this mountain is called Human Realm. It means that the northern side of this mountain is the human world, whereas the southern side is a barren land. Xiao Ying focused her eyes on the faint signs of human habitation in the north as she spoke faintly. Human Realm? What a strange name. June Moxie replied. He thought to himself, Xiao Ying has been ignoring me all this time, but now she suddenly wants to talk to me. Why is it? Do you see it? The further north you go, the denser the human world is, and most of the human world's inheritances are gathered there. After tens of thousands of years of development and reproduction, it finally became the flourishing world we have today. Xiao Ying Lengling looked at June Moxie. And the thing that guarantees all of this is the war for seizing the heavens. Do you see it? From here to the south, the furthest and also the highest mountain is the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and the war for seizing the heavens will be held there. June Moxie looked into the distance, only to see a majestic mountain rising straight up into the sky amidst the clouds. Above the clouds, there was also the body of that mountain. It was impossible to see where the peak of the mountain was, as if it pierced through the heavens. If the war for seizing the heavens is lost, the strange races will invade the human world, and the tens of thousands of years of human prosperity will be destroyed. All the prosperity in front of him would turn into hell on earth. In fact, all humans will become slaves and food for the alien races. Xiao Lengling said heavily. And just a few days ago, those 30 people that you personally slaughtered were experts that were about to shed their blood for the entire human race in the war for seizing the heavens. Do you know what it means to lose those people? What does it mean? Jun Moxie tilted his head. This means that the Xian continent will be defeated in this war for seizing the heavens. The invasion of the strange races was about to become a foregone conclusion, a fact. The continent is plunged into misery and suffering, and the scene of devastation is right before our eyes. Xiaoying said heavily, her eyes spitting fire, and the main culprit behind all of this is the battle you started. Jun Mo Xie, don't tell me you don't feel guilty? Guilty conscience? Why should I feel guilty? Jun Moxie said calmly, what you're talking about, the destruction of the people, the invasion of the alien tribes, that has nothing to do with me. You. Xiao Ying didn't expect that the young hero who controlled such a powerful force would actually say such irresponsible words. She was so angry that her face turned pale, and she couldn't say anything for a long time. Jun Moxie didn't care about Xiao Ying's disappointment at all. He turned his face away and continued mercilessly, I'm already sick of hearing about the safety of the continent. I don't want to hear anyone mention these words in the future, especially in front of this young master. Because the moment I hear it, my balls hurt. And don't associate these righteous things with this young master. These things have nothing to do with this young master at all. You say you don't want to hear it? But you're harming the interests of the world. Xiao Ying said sternly. The war for seizing the heavens is about to fail because of you. Because of you, countless lives will be plunged into misery and suffering. You didn't kill them, but they will die because of you. What right do you have to say that you don't want to hear it? How is it unrelated to you? Do you know how many innocent lives will be lost because of you? Bullshit. The lives of the world will die because of me? There's no smoke without fire. The reason I kill people is because people want to kill me. Jun Moxie said angrily. This daddy has never provoked the 3 Holy Lands. This daddy has never even offended you. But you King use your sanctimonious faces to do all sorts of things, coming wave after wave to find trouble with me. I can't get rid of you. And now you still have the face to blame me? Even if many people really die because of this, it's the responsibility of your *TTY Holy Lands. It has nothing to do with this daddy. This daddy was originally the descendant of the Duke of Tianxiang City. I was rich and had a life of luxury. But because of your ruthlessness, I had no choice but to abandon my family and retreat to the Tian Fa forest to live with the thousands of Xian beasts. This daddy has already backed down to this point, but you still won't let it go. You still attack my family, my friends, and anyone related to the Jun family. You won't let them off. You even ran to the Tian Fa forest to assassinate me. If it weren't for the fact that this daddy has some abilities and has some trump cards that I haven't used up, I would have been killed 800 times by you bastards. You're simply bastards. The guardian of the continent? The 3 Holy Lands are all a bunch of bastards, including the 3 of you. And now you still have the nerve to talk about justice and the lives of the world with me? Ask yourselves, are you even worthy? You can't kill me, but instead, you're blaming me for the deaths of the world's people? Is there such a thing? Since you have the intention to kill me, I'll kill you first. It's that simple. So what if you're doing it for the sake of the world? Even if you're doing it for the sake of the universe, even if you're the only remaining pillars of the world, Killing you will cause the sky to collapse. As long as you want to kill me, I'll still kill you. At most, we'll just split up and everyone will die together. June Moxie smiled coldly and said, everyone only has one king life. If people die, birds fly up. If they don't die, they'll just continue to cause trouble. So what if the world is plunged into misery and suffering? I don't care about these things. You want me to be righteous? That's impossible. I've never thought of myself as a hero or a righteous person. You want to talk to me about the common people of the world? You've misunderstood me. So what if this continent really collapses? After tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years, it'll still be a new world. But no matter who you are, please don't think of yourself as a savior. That's disgusting. June Dashao smiled maliciously and looked at Xiaoying. Have you heard of the idiom, a monkey wearing a crown? A monkey wearing a crown thinks he's a king? Don't you think your 3 holy lands are laughable? Comparatively, you're just a bunch of stronger monkeys. What right do you have to represent the world? What right do you have to call yourself a savior? Okay, even if you claim to be a savior, it's fine. But don't make yourself sound so noble first and then use this nobility to attack others. You don't have that right. I'll say it again, you're not worthy. Jun Mo Xie had said it so smoothly that he had even said, okay, without even noticing it, let's take 10,000 steps back. You can put yourself on the pedestal of a savior because of some things you've done. No one will care about that. But don't expect others to repay you. The 3 of you are old and should be able to tell the difference between being active and being passive. You did those things because you were willing. It seems like no one has ever held a knife to your neck and forced you to sacrifice yourselves. You can choose not to do it. This isn't your duty. Do you understand? Let me tell you, no matter who is missing in this world, it won't affect anything. Even without your 3 holy lands, the strange races might not be anything special. Understand? What a joke. After a long speech, Jun Moxie cursed to his heart's content. But when he finished speaking, he discovered that the 3 people beside him didn't say anything. Instead, their faces were heavy, as though they were deep in thought. After standing at the peak of the mortal realm for a long time, Chu Wu Hui finally let out a long sigh. Let's go. From here, there's still another 3 days of travel. Xiaoying, whose face was filled with anger and then turned solemn, didn't reprimand Jun Moxie anymore. The 4 of them flew silently, like 4 shooting stars streaking across the land. As the saying goes, the mountain in sight runs to the death. From the peak of the mortal realm, they could clearly see the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. But even with the speed of these 4 experts, they still hadn't reached the foot of the mountain even after flying for 2 days. Jun Moxie was very curious. How could they see the Pillar of Heaven's mountains from several thousand li away? Even if his eyesight was good, it shouldn't be to that extent, right? After all, the distance was too far. As though seeing through Jun Moxie's doubts, Chu Wu Hui smiled lightly and said, "You'll understand when you get there." Speaking of which, it was strange. Ever since Jun Moxie had said those words, the attitude of the 3 people towards Jun Moxie had become much better. This caused Jun Moxie to feel a little suspicious. Could it be that these 3 fellows were just asking for a scolding? Or were they the legendary masochist? Were they the typical type of people who were looking for a beating for no reason? Do you want this young master to scold them every few days? It's just moving my mouth. It doesn't take much effort. Just as he was considering the feasibility of this idea, he suddenly discovered that Chu Wu Hui and the other 2 had stopped. His heart stirred and he also stopped in his tracks. Xiao Ying's tone was filled with a sense of relief as she muttered, "The mountain in front is where the Heaven Saint Palace is." Her tone was filled with the joy of returning home. Jun Moxie looked over and saw that tens of li ahead, a majestic mountain had risen from the ground. At the peak of the mountain, a few houses could be faintly seen amidst the white snow. As they got closer, June Moxie suddenly discovered that there were tens of thatched cottages there. A few lush tree trunks propped up the main body of the house, and there were even green buds growing out of them. The roofs were covered with vines. It was a building that could not be any more crude. This is the legendary Heaven Saint Palace? June Moxie stared at it in a daze and suddenly turned his head back in disbelief. In his heart, the legendary Heaven Saint Palace should be a magnificent palace. How could he have imagined that it would be in such a dilapidated state right in front of him? Xiao Ying smiled proudly and said, "This is the Heaven Saint Palace. Admirable." June Moxie said sincerely. As the strongest expert of the continent, he was actually willing to live in such a place. No matter what, it was enough to make others admire him. "Many thanks." Xiao Ying smiled lightly, feeling very satisfied with June Moxie's words. She could tell that June Moxie's admirable was from the bottom of his heart, and her bad impression of June Moxie also changed slightly. 300 li east of the Heaven Saint Palace is the mountain peak where Hermitage is. Another 1,000 li diagonally away is the supreme Golden City. About 2,000 li to the west is the illusory Blood Sea. The mountain where the Heaven Saint Palace is located is called the Heaven Saint Mountain by the Three Holy Lands. And just 1,000 li south of the Heaven Saint Mountain is the place that will decide the fate of the continent, the Pillar of Heaven's Peak. At the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's Peak there is a huge area that has collapsed, and the war for seizing the heavens will be held here. So it's here. This place is really hard to find. June Moxie smacked his lips and asked, "Those three places, are they all like the Heaven Saint Palace?" A trace of awkwardness appeared on Xiao Ying's face as she stammered, "Those three places, cough cough, compared to this place, are slightly more luxurious." June Moxie let out a meaningful "oh" and said, "Slightly luxurious? What kind of explanation is that? To actually let their ancestors live in such a simple and crude place. It would be understandable if they were also so simple, but it's a pity that the truth is very different. Frugality has always been the tradition of the Heaven Saint Palace." Cheng Yinshao said lightly. "It seemed to be an argument. What a good tradition. It's really not easy for you guys to not freeze or starve to death. It's all thanks to your Xianqi ah. Xianqi is really a good thing. At least you won't starve to death." June Dashao sighed. The faces of the three instantly darkened. "So it's really this kind of frugality ah." June Moxie finally reached the top of Mount Heaven Saint and clicked his tongue in wonder. F*ck, such frugality, this daddy wishes for it even in my dreams. Can you guys not be so F*king hypocritical? F*ck, this is called frugality? Frugality your face. I wish your entire family riches. June Dashao finally got a good look at the thatched cottage of the Heaven Saint Palace from such a close distance. He couldn't help but be enraged. F*ck, to think that it was actually like this after deceiving this daddy's heartfelt admiration. The entire mountain peak was flat, and the spiritual qi was so dense that it had almost materialized. Although it wasn't as dense, pure as the spiritual qi in the Hongjun Pagoda, it was still filled with the essence of plants. The Heaven Saint Palace was made up of a total of 100 houses, and the pillars of each house were all large trees that were still growing. And this kind of tree, June Moxie recognized it, Xian Ling wood. The age of the Xian Ling wood could reach up to 10,000 years, and when it was cut into pieces and worn on the body, it would have the effect of calming one's mind. A living Xian Ling wood was in existence similar to a small spirit-gathering formation, and it could automatically gather heaven-earth spiritual qi. This time, every house required at least 6 or more Xian Ling wood. Cultivating Xian qi in such an environment, one would never have to worry about one's mind going haywire or going berserk. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.